Brown, excuse me. Starting following out the these projects going all the way to 2030, are they planning for current past sales tax revenue or anticipate?
No, it would be anticipated that it'd have to be renewed. So obviously, if that half penny sales tax is not renewed, all these plans will go away or start over.
Okay, because I didn't know that, and I didn't know if it was encumbered already.
No. You would have to have the money generated from half penny in 28, 29, 29, 30, 30, 31, right? Because it expires in November of 27. This is just a forecast. None of those, as far as Cobb, the only ones that are underway right now are Griffin and Raw. Cobb, Riley, and then moving to Sable Palm and Godby have just been identified as the next 4 up.
All right.
But those can certainly change.
Thank you.
Mr. Superintendent, or Mr. McLean. So if the half penny sales tax has to be renewed in 2020 or is up officially in 2027, have the funds, to Mr. Jones's point, been encumbered to cover phase 3 of Griffin and phase 1 of Raw? And so the project's looking bigger.
Right.
Okay. All right. So then phase 4 of Griffin, phase 2 of Raw, the concept of Cobb and the concept of Riley, those funds are not encumbered. So those funds will be dependent upon half cent renewal. However, the 2026, 2027 projects, those funds have been encumbered and we can cover those if something would happen where it was not renewed.
26, 27, yes.
Okay.
And then the first half of 27, 28. But as of December of 27, January of 28, those projects we just have to be put on hold.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for clarifying that, but that was the answer to the question. Yes, 26, 27, yes, that is on the current absence. That's on the current absence, and then second, third, and fourth year project will be just on the absence. So thank you. So
Would any of these projects look at capacity? And no Cobb as well under capacity would be small buildings there, but some of them would be healthy in order to reflect the capacity. Yes, you see that?
Yeah, that would be a consideration once we design those classrooms.
That's a great question, Ms. Wood. And I would wait for us to talk about capacity until after Brooks' presentation, because again, as I said earlier, Miss Smith kind of counted or enumerated, 6 schools, but as we talked about in the onset of this conversation, there was a second half of the presentation that we had to hear before we started projecting numbers of schools and their under capacity. So I'm going to continue to say that. Let's wait until the entire presentation until we start making those kinds of announcements. Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Question. What do we base when we look at what projects are slated? What do we base that on? What's the criteria? Will get us full and again about mix or something?
So we follow our capital outlay priority list that we have.
So it's just based on need, kind of?
Well, it's based upon several factors, based upon age facility, based upon work orders, based upon life cycle costs and the house facility itself, for spending work orders, the utility costs. Those several factors are taken into consideration when we make those decisions.
Is enrollment trends taken into consideration?
We typically do those facilities back at the same capacity or less.
So we're putting money in schools to decrease capacity sometimes.
No, just take for Griffin, for instance, we're building Griffin back at the capacity that currently is.
Okay. So
do we take into consideration schools that are busting at seams or that might have a new development coming in or certain areas of town that are seeing growth when we look at what projects should be on the list?
We do.
We do. So can you, or superintendent, explain why I don't see Mulford anywhere on here for a possible expansion?
So I think Mr. Williamson can address that, Brandon.
Okay.
We did take into consideration when we built, when we did renovation to WT.
Okay,
Again, important that we go to the whole presentation. I think it's a really important question, but I think there were multiple pieces that we're gonna see.
That's fine.
Help us.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Dr. Cheese.
I've kind of noticed a bit of a pattern here. So as we move through this presentation, each of the board members and superintendent will see how everything fits together. So each individual was kind of doing what the superintendent had tasked them to do. And then it all came together as one whole project. So what you're seeing now in this presentation, what Mr. McLean just presented to you was his piece of the entire project. So Dr. Nicholas, what you're saying is at the end of the presentation, or as the presentation of the day kind of flows through, you're going to see how these items are all interconnected and you're going to understand better. So what Mr. McLean just presented was his portion of the project. So it doesn't right now accurately reflect where we are district-wide with our space utilization. It reflects his portion of that task. To your point, Mr. Dr. Nicholas, when Ms. Hunter goes through, that'll bring even more enlightenment to the board on where we are with our space utilization. So I just want to make sure everybody is on board and clear about what Mr. McLean did. It doesn't mean that's where we are now. It means that was his portion.
Thank you, Dr. Cheese.
Thank you, Dr. Chair. So again, to kind of follow what John superintendent, these 3 years out are actually contingent upon the renewal of the Haskins sales tax. And finish up the last year of just getting projects to be done. And excuse me. Phase 4 draw, renovation of Level 16 and administration of media center. Site work, phase 2 new classroom wing, Raleigh phase 2 new classroom wing, and Table Pond and Godby front up in plans and first phase and finish. And all this is contingent. So if it's for season change, you'll see the need to modify this plan period, but it's always that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McQueen. Any other questions for Mr. McQueen? If not, we are going to take a 5-minute break. And then we'll reconvene back at 10 o'clock.
Good morning.
Thanks.
Have a seat. Hey, James, I'm good, man. How you doing? You don't hear those? See, look at your reputation.
It's easier from those sides.
One was our golden state.
Or do you?
Here's this batch that brings back one was there's 6 students currently on the airport's presentation today. Third. Well, we got to read just now. Right, that wouldn't be. We'll go with those, and then as I hear these questions.
Yeah.
The presentation has been, I mean, because of the way this, the cadence of this retreat, I want to make sure we go back and out. Here's another one. This. Okay. Going on, they do your. You're recording. I'll see you later on the ballot. Good to see you, brother. Hey, man, it was good. I wasn't here when we did the, but it was, I watched it. It was so good. Good. Yeah, appreciate it. Hey, man. Hey, how are you? Hold on. Like, hey, ladies. Good for you. How are you? Like, I understand how. Exactly like that. Yeah, put it on.
It's not like I have nobody else to tell me.
I'm trying to see if I'm allowed it.
Allegedly. I'm pretty sure that those which I love, but I don't know. Oh, that was so.
It's the family. I've had a special thank you.
And in Kansas.
I have asked and they were like, let me check again. So.
Okay.
I know, right? Well, goodness, please, like, your. Thank you, sir.
No. Making sure that I can reference in here. I know a lot of words, but they'll make up words.
He just makes them all, we're just three together.
All right, we're gonna get started in one more minute. Right, right. We're gonna start back in 1 minute.
That was us too.
All right, the time is now 10:01, so we're going fast. I'm gonna go ahead and call us back to order. And up is Mr. Justin Williamson.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, board members. This is me, Williamson. So as the superintendent mentioned earlier, he tasked TIS with creating some interactive dashboards using all of our data for the last several years. And so that we could really ask what if questions. And so we've been taking that information and we've been putting it in there. We started with the 21-22 school year, because that was the year that we were coming out of COVID. And we know that the COVID year data was all over the place, enrollment was not good. And so we started really kind of coming out of the COVID year there. And so as we pull that data in, the very first thing that he asked us to do is to generate some trends. And so if you will look at the interactive dashboard that is up on the screen there, I'm actually going to start going through the data that is here. And I'm going to start in the lower left corner. So you see where it says FTE forecast. And you also see a card that says FTE trend slope year over year. Right. And so right now, we are looking at elementary schools, and you'll notice that over there on the side, we have lots of options that we can choose from. We can zero into a specific school, a specific grade level, a school type, such as middle, elementary, high. So we can slice the data however we would like to slice it to get to the answers, the answers to the questions that we are looking for. And so the very first thing that when we started off is we calculated an FTE trend slope. And so we took the FTE data, an average of surveys 2 and 3 for the 21-22 school year, all the way through the 24-25 school year. And we put that out into a graph there. And one of the first things that we did was we did what's called a linear regression or a best fit model. And so as you can see, enrollment fluctuates up. Some years you're up, some years you're down. And so this linear regression really tries to find a slope, a line through all of the data points. And so it's looking for that best fit. Normally when we say slope, we think of just 2 points. But this best fit model actually uses all of the data points to try to find that best fit line through there. And so as you can see, over the last 4 years of data there, that the FTE earned, and we made all of our decisions on this dashboard here off of FTE because that's what generates and drives our budgets. As you can see, for elementary school for the last 4 years, our FTE is actually trending up. We are, year over year, we're going up about 23 FTEs in the elementary level. If we look at middle school.
Can I clarify something?
Sure.
Are you including charter schools in that data?
No. So we do have their data, but we are filtering them out. I can actually add them back in if you would like, but they are not in this list here. Okay. And we actually looked at the charter schools too, and their trends actually kind of mirror ours with the ups and downs as well, so that they're fairly consistent. But the data that we're looking at right now is just our schools. So our middle schools are also trending up, not as much as elementary school, but their FTE generation is also coming up ever so slightly. And then we look at our high schools, and we are trending down. And so we're losing about 46 FTE units year over year out of our high schools. Seems to be the trend. So that was the very first thing that we started with here. The next thing that we did was we created this FTE forecast model.
So,
Yes, sir.
Would dual enrollment have anything to do with that trending down, because we're looking specifically at FTE and butts and seats and how many hours they're in?
Yes, sir. So if there's increase in dual enrollment, that would do a decrease in FTE.
Okay, that's really important because I know we've increased in dual enrollment over the last few years. And so Thank you.
One more question, like, when you're saying our enrollment trends, you're only looking at you're only going back to 21, is that correct?
21, 22.
Okay, because if we go back farther, it's a completely different story.
It does. But I think that what happened is in 2021, we had COVID, and that's the year that we took a real plunge, right? So for the last 4 years, now going into 5 years, we've been fairly consistent, right? So I think that we took COVID out of the analysis intentionally because it was such an outlier event, right? And so, we didn't want to factor that in because God forbid we never have another COVID. And so we're just really looking at what's happened since COVID.
And I appreciate you using COVID as that demarcation, because that's when we saw the world change. Everything changed. And so you've been able to capture the 3 years, which establishes trend data, plus the demarcation of COVID. So,
I'm gonna disagree with you on 3 years establishing trend data.
well, no, that's the definition of trend data. Like it's 3 or 4 years establishes trend data.
Okay.
That's the standard definition.
So, the second,
Longitudinal data is longer, so we're clear. But trend data is 3 more years.
yeah, and we actually used 4 years of data, and we have not used this year's data because we've not completed survey 3. But we will actually start getting preliminary data back in a couple of weeks. But just looking at survey 2 for this year, it's still maintaining fairly consistent. So the next thing that we did then was we generated a forecast model. And so we took that trend data, we put it here, we graphed it, and then we said, okay, based on what we are seeing in the trend, within a 95% confidence interval, project for us our projected enrollment, right? And so if you're looking here, I know it's kind of hard to see on the screen, you see a line, a little line here, and then you see some shaded area. Right, so the shaded area is where we think with a 95% confidence that our enrollment is going to hit somewhere in that shaded area. The little thin line being the best guess projection as to where we think enrollment will go.
Where?
So right here. You see this? So I'm looking at the FTE forecast. Yeah. Does everybody see it? Yeah. And then, yeah, and I know it's hard to see on the screen there, but the shaded area gives us an upper and a lower. We think that enrollment's going to, fall within that range, or FTE will fall within that range, with the forecast being the most likely scenario. And again, that was modeled on 95% confidence variable. Once we had that data, you will notice up there, the next thing we did was in the upper corner there, you'll notice that we have a map. And so right now we are looking at elementary schools. And so we color-coded those school zones based on their trend. Right? So if a school is blue, its trend is -10 or +10 year over year. It's between -10 and +10. So that we're saying that if the school zone is blue, that they are maintaining fairly consistent in their enrollment. If a school zone is green, we're saying that their trend is up more than 10 a year over year. And if a school zone is red, we're saying that they're trending down more than 10, and they're losing more than 10 year over year. Right? And keep in mind that all of this data is year over year trends, right? So again, there are years that you're up and then years that you're down, right? So this is just the trend over those last 4 cycles. Okay, so if
Mr. Williamson,
yes, sir.
I would be interested outside of this, either if it can be done, manipulated. I'd like to see that information per school.
Okay. For like the entire district.
Or per school.
Per school. Yeah, so I think we want to, so if I click on time to here.
I think what he was saying is, could you move it around based on their 5 districts? But he has.
So he had districts, yes, yes.
But he does have, I mean, you can put that back up there, you know where your lines are, you know where your boundaries, north,
Well, that's.
south, east, and you know where your boundaries are.
And therein lies the issue. I'm not entirely sure. My boundaries, I have an idea, but. And it doesn't have to happen now, but I would like to see that information by school board member district.
But he does have it by individual school too.
What's gonna be hard though is like Lori and I split, so it's really gonna be difficult.
Yeah.
It's gonna be difficult.
A lot of
to remember.
I share with everybody.
Yeah.
Except your own.
The GIS mapping, it is possible. I do it every day for the county. For all 5 of my school board members. And I take economic development data and disaggregate it according to the school board member data. Not the schools, but the boundaries, which articulate our school board member district. So that's what I want to see.
We can certainly do that. And it's great that you mentioned that, Mr. Jones. This school map here actually came from the county. This is the county's GIS data.
Which we manage, right?
Yes,
Right.
and I will say I am very appreciative that they make all of their data open to the public so that we can just go out there and grab it and pull it down. It certainly makes our life a lot easier. So they have those schools on maps already in there. They also have the school board maps that we can pull down as well. So as I was saying, we can zoom into any, individual school over here to see exactly what is, happening at that school. So those are just some of our elementary schools. So again, overall elementary is showing that. So if you'll look over in the upper right corner, you'll see FTE by grade level. Right. So and again, right now we're currently looking at all elementary schools. So this is how much FTE was generated per year by grade level. And then right below it, you will also see that we split out the FTE by type. And that goes to your key that is in your binder that Nancy was describing earlier that indicates the funding, the weights on those. And then lastly, we have the 2020 census data that is actually aligned to school zone. And so we can see by age range, age bands within the individual school zones, how many students are in there, at least it was as of the 2020 census. And again, if we, zoom into an individual school, you'll see that it brings our census down to just that school zone. So any questions here, any data that you would like to see or
Any school you like to see?
I'm wondering if you could take this information and go back about 10 more years. I hear Marcus saying trend data means 3 years, but if you really look at a more historical trending, we see something totally different. We see a huge decline in overall numbers in really the majority of our school. I mean, I can just pick a few. Oak Ridge went from, so I'm going back to 2010, 558 down to 416. Story Park went from 582 to 453. Deer Lake went from 916 to 829. Roberts went from 870 to 821. So if we go back even farther, and the reason I think it's really important to go back farther is because of the recent developments in what we see in our state, and that's specifically census values. We don't have that data more than, and we have charter going back 10 years, and we can see the ebbs and flows. We see a couple that I pointed out that consistently are increasing in enrollment. But if we look at a longer history before scholarships, we can see a significant decrease. So I'm wondering if you can take this data and go back even farther in history?
I can go back to 2017 easily. We can certainly go back further, a little bit more work, but I think we can certainly get to 2017, but that's when we focus. So I have that data easily at hand. Outside of that, we have to get the data,
And we can't,
but it exists.
it does exist. DOE, that's where I get it from, is DOE has it, some of it's archived, so it's a little, I think even their tool has, like this one is, only goes back to 2020, that Know Your Schools data. So to get anything prior to that, you do have to go back and dig into Excel sheets, but it really is an important piece, because as we know, most of our schools in county were not built within this time period. They were built 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. So we wonder, what was the history and what was the reason for where they were built and why they were built during the time. So unfortunately, we don't want to go back completely that far, but we love that a historical. I just feel like it's really important for us to go back even farther back, back to 2010, because we see a completely different trajectory than what we're seeing in the last post-COVID years.
So I want to be clear. Marcus didn't say training data starts at 3 years. That's what all like that's what it is, right? 1 year establishes a snapshot. 2, according to any auditing firm, 2 years establishes a comparison. 3 years establishes a trend. So it's not, I'm not making something up arbitrarily. This is really what audit firms, with data researchers, scientists, this is what they look at. I think it's important that, and I like where you started, and I'll defend where you started, because that's where, so when we saw our schools really impacted was the universal voucher system. That's when we started to see the real decline. We can go all the way back to 2007. We can go back to 2002, right? But how does that impact the decisions that we have to make today? Right. And so the data is only as good as the contextual decisions that one has to make. That's why it has to be a demarcation. That's why COVID and post-COVID is a great demarcation, because we've seen so many things happen, including universal vouchers, that's where the conversation started. So I appreciate historical perspective. I really, really, really do. Right. One of my strengths from Clifton's strength is context. Right. That's one of my top 5. So I appreciate it. However, we're making decisions, right? Contextual decisions based on what's happening around us. I do think we need to look at the origins of when it happened and start looking at the data from that line of demarcation. And that's why I appreciate 2021.
Just in response, I did not mean to imply you made that up. I know your
You
stuff.
said Marcus said. So
And I gotcha. But I will dispute that the real changes started coming with charter and scholarship. That's not what we see. If you go to page 14 and in the document that I put together, which does go back to 2010, you'll see drastic declines between 2010 and 2015, and even 2010 to 2021. So really we saw, I mean, if you go 10 to 15, we see drastic declines in a lot of our schools. So there is a really unique history to our enrollment numbers that really, does go back farther. So it's not that the declines just started because of charter and scholarship. We see declines going down.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that. When I was a teacher, we had 35,000 students in Leon County schools, right?
Right.
So I'm not saying that I'm very much aware, and I was a teacher in 2007.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm aware. But I'm saying when we started seeing because you're going to have attrition, right? It's going to ebb and flow, as even this data, suggests, right? We're talking about monumental changes, right? And so that's all I'm saying. But let's keep going.
All right.
Justin, I do have a question. So that map you have there, that's elementary schools only, right?
That's elementary.
So your data dating back to the last 4 years in Leon County basically shows declining enrollment in elementary schools in the north and the northeast. Or the county. Pretty stable enrollment in the center for the most part, in the south, and then some growth in the green areas in the southern part of the county. Is that what that
Yes, sir.
reflects?
And if I flip into middle school, that's middle school zones. So that's Montford. You're like, and then you flip over to high schools, right? And so it's fairly, for the most part, it's fairly consistent, right? I mean, you're seeing the northeast is, there's a slight decline, and the south side has a slight increase over the last 4 years.
Go back specifically to Montford to address Board Member Smith's comment from earlier. So can you pull up Montford?
Which comments are there?
She made a comment about to Mr. McQueen, when we decide about capital outlay projects and what to fund, do we take into consideration potential growth as a result of developments in the community? We absolutely do, which is why we went to WT more and added student stations of more in anticipation of students that will be coming to our elementary school out of the Lilani development. And so is that offered?
Yes, that was 32.
So what did your research over the last 4 years tell you about Montford Middle School?
Yeah, so in 23-24, between 23 and 24, as you can see, there is a rather substantial increase. In a moment, we're going to take a look at school choice. I think that there's a little bit of that is driving some shifts in numbers. But yeah, I mean, there is a bit of an increase.
Okay, all right. I didn't mean to get you off your off your game.
And I think again, when we talk about Lilani, we're talking about something that our community hasn't seen and probably since the 60s, since the lot was built. It's a planned development. It's going to be over 7,000 single family, dwelling units. And that is literally going to be on the backside of Mumford. So they're already at 102% capacity. And we all know we don't want to see portables in that area. Now I know Swift Creek has capacity, and I'm sure we'll talk about that, but I just feel like that's I think what we also see at Mumford is a significant amount of kids choosing in from private school. Possibly one of our highest, and I don't know if you have that data today, but possibly one of the most attractive schools to pull in students from that are attending private schools, elementary school. So we definitely don't want to see overcrowding there or portables. If we have a school that's attracting kids away from our private schools, I would think we want to keep growing that, keep allowing for space at that school. And then we also have funds allocated in that area to the tune of $6 million from Greenpoint that could go into an expansion there. So I do still want to keep that growth bubbling into the surface. Thank you.
Wilson?
Mr. Williamson,
Yes.
would you go back to elementary schools, please? I just want to point something out for our board members.
Sure.
When you take a look at this middle column here, this section here, I want us to be aware of our student population and which areas our student population is growing. And I want to point out our 254 population and our 255, those are our students with severe disabilities. And also our 130 population, which is going to be our English language learners. So you can see in our elementary schools, we are growing in those numbers of students with disabilities and also our English language learners. So those populations have increased from 2023 to 2024. I just wanted to bring that to everybody's attention because, of course, the entire presentation and the point of us all being here is student centered. So we need to make sure that we keep an eye on the ball and we know where our students are coming from, which Justin's going to get into next, where they're going, and also which students are entering our district. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
One more request. I know you guys know all this codes by heart, 101, 112, 130. We don't. Is there any way you can add a coding somewhere on the site that, so we know what those numbers mean. It just, they don't mean anything to me.
Member Smith, there's a key in your binder under trend data that has those codes in there for the student population.
Oh, yeah, got. Thank you.
Right. One last thing I wanted to just point out on this screen here is so across the district. So we are trending down in kind of kindergarten enrollments. Our middle school, though, is trending up in sixth grade enrollments. And so those two are kind of offsetting. High school ninth grade enrollments are trending way down. So in looking at the data, it appears that we are losing our students between middle school and high school. And so that was one of the things that came out of this.
Quick question on that one. Are we following whether, because if that could be two things, right? That could be kind of a birth bubble that's going through that we see moving up and down with that age range, or it could be charter and scholarship. Are we kind of tracking that? Seeing
So
people talk about the baby boom, you know, and you want to
Yeah.
go through, you know, the history.
right. I mean, we can look at by year birth rates. I mean, we do have that data is available to us. And so that's something that we can put in there. But if you look year over year, in fact, I'm just looking at ninth grade here, they consistently declined every single year. And so I don't know with middle school increasing and high school ninth grade decreasing, that would be indicative of a birth bubble there. But I mean, that's something that we could certainly add that data in there and take a look at.
I think that
Well-
would be interesting. Go ahead, I
You
think.
got your name?
Yeah.
Oh, Dan, help me now. You're saying that the enrollment goes up at those schools and goes down in high school?
So the three data points that I just showed was kindergarten enrollment, and it was down slightly. And then middle school sixth grade enrollment, it was trending up. So we're, year, and so this is year over year. And so the last four data points, sixth grade has increased year over year. And then now we're looking at ninth grade as the entry point for high school, and year over year they are declining. So every year, if this trend continues, next year we'll lose 107 more students in ninth grade if that trend holds.
I think that, oh, I'm sorry, man. So I think there comes a time where we move from anecdotal and from myth to data. We have talked privately as a community about trends, particularly relative to middle school and high school. And I don't know if what methodology we secure data that can then inform choices, offerings, curriculums, instructions, a variety that may be made available to reverse trends, particularly that we will see at particular schools where we see this dynamic occur, and other dynamics. Because if we look at some of these middle school numbers, we have talked privately off record about why some of those trends occur. Then when do we move beyond conversation to provide a response, and then move beyond myth and rhetoric to really being able to substantiate that what we claim to occur? And I think that occurs with much like what one of the things I appreciate about this conversation and this retreat, most specifically, you and the superintendent of the team, we move beyond myth and rhetoric, and we deal strictly with numbers. So then, if we're going to respond to what we see are enrollment trends, that was one of the things that we said we would focus on. How do we get the data from our community to be able to then offset what we see as these trends.
To extend that point, I think we need to do, and I'm sure you guys have done it, more disaggregation on which schools. I'm sure you have that data. And not only which schools, but we're looking at this revised report. If we're offering that as the most accurate representation of our current usage of our spaces, we will see that if you say we're losing schools at, for example, Leon High School, we're losing students at Leon High School, right? This particular document would suggest that we don't have the space to house them anyway. So then what is it that we do, right? Like if we don't want to lose students, but they're all in spaces, it may go back to Ms. Smith's point where we now have to expand. Now, Leon is not an option because it's land, right? But if we see that same trend happening at, for example, Mumford, then to go back to Ms. Smith's point, because we don't want to lose the FTE, then do we start expanding? So it's that data that you presented, plus this utilization data that then better informs us of where we need to be building out. I see some high schools on here that now I'm curious to see. I know Godby has gone up specifically, but and that's anecdotal, right? I don't know what the numbers are. I don't know what the trend numbers are.
They're holding fairly consistent.
They're holding fairly consistent. The utilization rate there is 81%. So there's more opportunity to grow there. So then the question becomes, how do we grow there, right? What is the district's makeup, right? How many kids go there? How many kids choice out, in that space? And then where do we go from there? So I do think that we have all the pieces in front of us. Now it's about what we do.
Not just throw a wrench in anything, but we're looking at FTE, not numbers of students. So I just think we need to keep that in mind. If the FTE in our higher weighted are going up, it might appear that population is going up. But when you look at actual student numbers, that's a different metric. So I just want us to keep that in mind with the numbers. And the thing I'd be curious about is if we looked at not FTE, but numbers, adding all the middle schools together, how many kids' bodies were there, and then look at the ninth grade numbers in the high schools to see how many bodies were there, how that would compare versus looking at FTEs.
I think it's an excellent point, Ms. Wood. That's an excellent point. One of the reasons why I asked about dual enrollment, for example, if you got some.
That's my thought. You said high school's going down, but we're looking at FTE. We're not looking at number of kids.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, look at this, John, right? So for example, so when I say privately, in my community, we and all of when we talk with our constituents in private conversations, we make some deductions, right, that are not necessarily substantiated by FTE. One of the things I know I was aware of is that there are a whole lot of families that opt out of going to Cobb Middle School and going to private schools, and they're returning to Leon. Right, I've heard parents talk about that. And that's parents making choices for them. But when do we then know that, and then find out how do we prepare that, such that so that's when I talk about moving from rhetoric and myth and private conversation to then saying, well, then if any of us have heard that, what do we do then to talk with the super about what do we do to remedy that? How do we talk to the parents who are making those choices to find out exactly why that occurs? And I just want to use that as an example of private conversations we have in our community about students and trends, choices that parents make. Good point, Ms. Jones. Ms. Smith.
Mr. Chair, one of the things actually goes to Roseanne's point is that average daily membership report. So where you're looking for at bodies, then you are, FTE. And Lincoln is a crazy example.
What are you looking at?
This is page 14 of my data. So this is why it's so important to go back farther than this. Lincoln was at over 2,000 students 10 years ago, over 2,000. Now they're down to 17. They're holding, like I said, they're holding steady. They were 1737 and 21 and 1743. Now that's average student membership. So what happened is 200, 200 or 300 students back from 10 years ago at Lincoln High School. Charles was already built and bustling, so you can't really say that's what it was. So it's very interesting to look like even farther back. What another point I was gonna make? I forgot. Go ahead.
Okay. Mr. Williams.
All right. Is there anything else on the screen that anybody would like to see?
Just, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
just to clarify, somebody brought that up, that if our high schools are declining, but yet many of our high schools, to your point, Dr. Nicholas, 99%, 100%, 97%. So how are they declining when the enrollment is still almost capped?
So overall, your high school, so we're just looking at just high schools right now. So overall, 9th, 10th, 11th and 12th grade, your district-wide high school trend down is 46, right? So when we saw the 109 trending down, that was not grade only. So we're just looking, so I would anticipate though that if our 9th grade is down over the next couple of years for that, that negative 46 to continue to increase. If you're having smaller 9th grade classes coming in. So they are, so there is a downward trend. You got Rickards down there at the bottom, which is trending up. And then you got Godby and Lincoln that are kind of holding steady. And then you have Childs and Leon that are trending down.
So it is that transition from middle school to high school, and then it looks like they're coming back. And that can be for any given reason. So I do think that, again, in this disaggregation, as we continue to drill and slice and dice, really understanding why are we falling in the gaps with just the transition, right?
I think, and if we continue to disaggregate, I think what I'd like to see is, all right, this birth group. So let's follow this group, whatever their 12th graders now, can we follow their history through school? Can we follow the 11th graders through school? So instead of saying our 9th grade is trending downward, it's really important to know what is that group that was born in that year? What did that look like in the beginning?
That's a good point.
Yeah,
That's what I thought.
to see, yeah.
So we have a metric that, and it's not in this dashboard, but we could easily use, it's called the graduation cohort.
Yes.
And so we start, kindergartner, we know what your graduation cohort is and we track you by cohort.
Right.
And so some of that's, we'd like us to do it. And so we can bring in cohort numbers.
Because I think what we would expect to see is this charter and scholarships evolve, we would see a greater percentage of those younger kids choosing another option than we would the high schoolers. I could be wrong. So I think that's, again, I would really like to see that as a cohort. So
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Jones.
When you were talking about going back 10 years, I was thinking about a snapshot from K through 12, right? You would track a kid based upon where there may have been satisfaction at the elementary school. But then when you made the option then to go to middle school, maybe there was something, maybe transportation, travel, proximity, right? All of those things weigh in. And so paying attention to the trends as you just put, am I using the right word, trends?
Yes.
Or the patterns, right? That if you were to go back and go pick a kid from K all the way to 12, there are choices, there are decisions that are made and options that are available to them. All of that. And so that's what goes back to Dr. Gale and the parent surveys that we do. I think that some of that we need to then look at that as they're communicating us to us, that also informs our choices in terms of what we do, the offers that we make. What does that data tell us, right? What's the percentage of parents who, if a kid is at Riley and they are zoned to go to Griffin compared to that kid who goes to Riley and is zoned for NIMS? right? And does that choice inform a parent's decision as to which school they may want to opt for choice, right? So we then take we look at our our school choice applications within the district. All of that comes together to create a profile that should inform our decisions as a board and as a.
And that was the optimal word. That's the word I was looking for you to go to. So different data sets inform different data points inform decision sets, right? And so longitudinal data is great for developing a profile, right? And then building maybe curriculum around the profile because we can now see the trajectory. That's very different than, and this is the point I was making earlier, than some of the the elephant in the room, school closure decisions, right? That's a different data set that one would use to make a very different decision. So that's kind of, so I was like, no, historical data is great. It is absolutely, people use historical data all the time to, again, develop profiles, develop, curriculum, talk about where we're going to go in the future. You use it as a workforce development professional, right? Like you use historic longitudinal data. But that wasn't a conversation for here. And that's why I was like, well, we go too far back.
Right.
And we start making those decisions based on too far back, then we can be shooting ourselves in the foot.
Well, one of the things that you brought up when you were first elected, right? And I remember this because it was a data question, right? And the district talked about how previously, in previous years, there was a person, we call it business intelligence in our office. We have a director of business intelligence whose job it is to make those comparisons across to inform us on trajectory, all these lovely, I love words, right? All these lovely words that we use, right? But that position now no longer exists. As we now find ourselves in a far more competitive educational ecosystem to our advantage based upon the subject matter expertise that we assemble, which is centuries worth, right? If you think about the cumulative, particularly like you got Rod with 50 years of experience in education, right? So when you add all of that together, right? But someone who then takes all of that cumulative data, we are then more intelligent than our competitors, right? That's why this conversation is so important, because if we take that data, it then informs how we move, how we spend, right? How we build, all of that. And so I think that's pretty important. And this conversation reveals how very important this sharing of information and data and analysis of these metrics, right?
And how we project. There are institutions of higher education now that have positions called futurists. And exactly what you're talking about, Ms. Smith, that's exactly, Mr. Jones, that's exactly what their job is. That's their entire job. So I'm not saying we need futurists, but
Okay, just when y'all are having it. If I could make a comment, Chair Nicholas, to address board members Cox's comment just a minute ago. If you look at our high schools at Child's at 100, Godby at 81, Godby had been down in the low 70s. Leon at 101, Lincoln at 88, and board member Smith, Lincoln had been over 100. That's good too. Rickers at 90. Rickers also was down in probably the high 60s or low 70s until we did a lot of projects at Rickers High School, and then still at 88, and Sarah's going to have that back to 100 or more. When we did our visit in Okaloosa, Laura, you wouldn't believe this, when I started looking at their schools when we were there, Niceville, Fort Walton, and Choctaw, all around 1,500 or 1,600 kids. I mean, they're all like low 70s now.
Wow.
So this phenomenon, and they're all, actually, we're really healthy as far as our high school enrollment numbers compared to Okaloosa, where those, like Choctaw was bigger than Leon in years past. They are, even their high school numbers and their high school capacities are down in the low 70s at schools that traditionally have been busting at the seams. So it's really kind of strange,
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Turn it back over to Mr. Williams.
Can I just take one last comment? But when you talk about, Mr. Superintendent, the reversing in trends, right? the intentionality of our investment in CTE at God, they certainly reverse that. Right, the intentional investments in amplifying of the CTE pros that we have at Rickards and the youth and a better use of the facilities following its expansion. So to reverse that, that goes back to again moving beyond myth and rhetoric to being intentional about how we make our investments, the choices we make in the offers that we have to meet the needs of our current student population.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Mr. Williamson?
So. It's a lot. And and everybody can read that and exactly, right.
We got it, we know.
So after we did all of that, the next one the superintendent asked us to take a look at is really our school choice to see kind of how movement is happening with students throughout the district, right? So this is a little overwhelming. So we're gonna zoom it down to just one school. So we're looking at Astoria Park. And so we're looking at the number of students who are choicing in. And so they have 89 students who are at Astoria Park that have choiced in. They have 378 students who are zoned for Astoria Park that are not going there. And so they have, a negative 289 enrollment change with choice policies. I do have charter schools on here, so you can see on this one, majority of Astoria students are going to TSMS. They're picking up 61 students, and SASC is also picking up 41. So that's 100 students right there that are leaving Astoria for charter schools. But this just kind of gives us an overview of the movement that occurs within the district. And so kind of how things are playing out. If we look at our middle schools, and again, we'll just zoom into one school so that we're not. And so we're looking at Swift Creek. So Swift Creek has a net gain of 175 students due to choice. And so 252 students choice into Swift Creek, but only 77 choice out.
Can you just click raw?
So Ross also has a net increase due to choice, 154. So as you can see, 244 of those are coming from Griffin.
Mr. Superintendent, I do not expect a response. I'll say that right now, because this is an off the cuff question. How we use this data when we're making administrative decisions on who goes there and who doesn't go there. You were not expecting that. I don't expect a decision. This is just something I'm putting out there. An opportunity for the community to meet the administrator is why this is so important. It introduces so that the first time little Johnny's mom meeting the principal is not because little Johnny was an accident, right? I think that I've never seen this before. This is incredible. And I do think that it could inform how we select administrators. You probably already do it. So I'm probably already seeing something that you do. But this to me is an incredible data point that could be utilized and leveraged.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I wonder how this data is used for capital outlay decisions. So we're clearly about to have been or going to, and obviously we're not gonna, stop that project, but we're putting, only 15, $20 million into a school that I'm looking at by the numbers, that 57, almost 60% of the population of Griffin's is choicing out. So how is this data also used for capital decisions?
Oh, yes, I'm just asking just in quick flow. Yes, Ms. Wood.
I would say, and part of that may be a zoning issue, right? You've got too many kids zoned into a school. It's just, we're so obligated to look at that. But this tells me what we keep talking about, transfer, about that on the board, and that is really telling our parents what school is about, truly your want to. Administrative, not just administrative, but getting, because people choose, think a lot by word of mouth. You know, that's how people make a lot of choices, and so how do we, but I had a question about the data. Some students never enroll in that schools, right? They go straight to SAS, they go straight to private school. Are we able to capture all of the students who are at the charter schools, or just the ones who've been on the county schools at one time?
No, we capture all the students at the charter school. They're required by law to use our SIS system.
Okay, so
So we have their data.
what we don't know really are the private schools.
Actually homeschool.
Homeschool, no, that is calculated.
Yeah, we get a lot of home because they have to report, parents have to tell us they're homeschooling, so we have that.
But do they really, I mean, there are a lot of homeschool, they'll never register with.
That's what I feel like. If you look at our enrollment numbers, homeschool says 50, 60, 70, that can't be right.
Yeah, that's 2,000.
Yeah,
At least 2,000.
that can't be right. So how are we tracking homeschool?
If they don't enroll this, we don't, we can't.
Build the scholarships, I'm sure not.
They don't share that data.
In new
If they're
legislation, they're supposed to.
getting,
318.
that's what I'm thinking.
If
That might
318
be-
passes, then yes, they will be. If
Okay.
318 doesn't pass, then no, still be out in the wind.
I don't believe there was an issue with scholarships when it first, when the scholarships first started and they were in our system as homeschooled, they had to get declassified as school in order to receive the scholarship. So the data might be skewed as well as our system. That will.
That's what, I figure it was because when you look at the enrollment data, the document that was using.
Okay, Mr. Williamson, I'm just curious. Do we have that information for Richters before and after construction?
Not before or after. This is a snapshot of this year's. I mean, we could certainly pull back from previous years.
Thank you.
This says their choice in is 14%, their choice out is 30%. So we're having 14% of students' choice in to recruits, which is actually surprising.
Yes, so at this year, in the 25-26 school year, we have 218 students that are enrolled at Rickard, whose home zone school is not Rickard's. We have 770 students whose home zone is Rickard's, but is attending another school.
And then on the right is where they're attending. So right now Lincoln leads the pack.
Yeah.
Taking, okay.
Yeah, so the Rickards is in the center, the school in the center is the school that you're looking at, and then the school on the left is going into the school, and the school on the right is where they're going out.
But this story tells us that, which I appreciate, that we're not losing our Rickard students to charter schools, private schools.
There are no choice schools.
Oh, okay. No, yeah, the Tallahassee class.
They're gone.
No,
Oh, the TCC.
Yeah, that's right. Sorry.
Yeah.
So any questions kind of about our school choice movement and?
So it's funny how those schools across the district, if you really analyze this, there's an ebb and flow, even if you go to Leon. You know, even Leon has a number of students, 468 that choice out, you really would not expect that. Go to Lincoln. So Leon had more kids choice out than choice in, as did Lincoln. And so it's really across the district, the ebb and flow and how these numbers just somehow work themselves out. You know,
We would have no place to put them at, Leon. They didn't.
No, you wouldn't.
According to this space utilization chart.
right, absolutely. The same with Griffin, because Griffin school zone is so large, and every kid, go back to Griffin, none of those kids choiced out, you have over 12, you have 1,100 kids at Griffin. So go to Montford.
Wow.
So even at Montford, you have 180 that choiced in, but 156 that choiced out. Now, one thing that we could do to address the issue at Montfort, and Tony's is wide open. Give me every kid, give me every kid, give me, so guess what? We've been sending them every kid. But if overcrowding does become an issue at Montfort, we would just simply eliminate them as a choice option. The first, that would be my recommendation, be the first step.
That's a real challenge and goes in opposition to everything we've been trying as a district to pull kids from private school. Because he gets the largest number of from private school fifth graders than any other school in town. So I would hate for us to
Shut it down.
I would hate for us to shut it down.
Okay, these are kids that have choice, that are not at private school. These are kids that have come from another school.
Okay.
Now, they may have,
Yeah,
they may have been fifth graders that were probably entering sixth grade that don't live in the Montfort Center.
a lot of them actually do live in the Montfort, but beside the point, I think that's the greatest number of choice in privates. But I see a really alarming statistic when you said only 468 choiced out this year. That's up almost 100 students from the year before that choiced out the Lamb.
Yeah. And I think to answer your question earlier about capital funding projects, that we would look at the age of the facility and the future use of the facility. And then also look at growth and development in the county, and those would be the things that have traditionally driven, decisions. Whether it was WT Moore was one of the first projects that I did, was based on growth and development. And then, Rangers High School and Fairview Middle School was based on age of facility and future use. But if there did come, something at Montfort where, that school was beginning to be overcrowded, that would be, one of the criteria that would be met to expand or you rezone, because you see Deer Lake right now, although it's lighted up right now, the Deer Lake's only, I think, in the 70s. I think 71 or 72% capacity. Right, there's two options: either you rezone or you add on. At Childs and at Lincoln, there's enough infrastructure at both of those schools. We talked about this before, where you needed to add a wing at Childs or a wing at Lincoln. But I think as far as what's been driving the decisions we've made over the last number of years is the age of the facility, along with its future planned use, and also growth and development.
I think that's really unfortunate. It's really unfortunate that that we're investing in schools that are in a continual decline, and we're not investing in schools that's at capacity. It's pulling kids from private school. It's just unfortunate.
So when you say what's your recommendation? You want to say add a wing in Montfort tomorrow?
I would like to see it in the 4-year plan. Yeah, I would. We're investing in schools that are in really declining population. We could be repurposing, we could be discussing consolidation. That's why it's a broader district-wide conversation. Yeah, I would like to see that. There's already money allocated from Green Point for that specific purpose. So we wouldn't even be really dipping into our current capital outlay or a half penny. Not only that, to rezone those kids to Deer Lake would hold them from within a mile of their school to have to drive about 6 or 7 miles to Deer Lake. And I hope I never see that in my district.
I second that.
That's a recommendation that you're asking.
Oh, absolutely.
So I think that, I'm sorry, go ahead. This is your day. No, I know we're not making motions, but we are, there are things that's being put on the radar. So I'm gonna make sure. So go ahead, Ms.
Okay, just honestly, if there are students that want to come into our schools, yes, if they don't get their school choice, even if they're coming from our schools, then they're gonna go somewhere else to private school. We want to keep our students, especially at a school that's doing those.
Thank you, Ms. Kaufman.
I'm not disagreeing with anything you're saying. I'm also saying the intentional investment that we have made in older Title I schools in this community is very important. We make a commitment on this board that every school was going to be equal in quality and newness. And there wasn't going to be a reason for someone to choose the school on one side of town versus the other because one facility was all torn out and the other wasn't. So I personally appreciate that we really taken that into consideration. And that's about aging facilities. And that's not just Title I schools, but it's also schools in our inner city core, like Rock, like Griffin, that are old. And we certainly don't want people to choice out because they haven't got that far of facility. So I think it's just a balance. We look at, you know, who wants to come in and do some adjusting perhaps, but not to denigrate at all the investments we've made to upgrade our schools.
Mr. Chair.
Point well taken, Mr. Jones.
Well, I can't remember when we last did it, but don't we vote on the 5-year capital outlay plan?
We do.
And what we may want to do, particularly as we, I'm using the wrong word, trajectory, trend, whatever. Maybe we may need to look at that more frequently than every 5 years. Or whatever, how often it is that we vote on that plan. Because as you see, because when you think about it, we did vote on these projects are not new to us. That's what we see on the sheet.
That's correct.
We voted on those projects that approved it. But since the last time we visited the conversation, for example, I remember when we preempted the conversation when you got all that information about the line, which did not inform. We had already voted, but we came back and we revisited. So here now with the trends that we see in the interim of our having made those decisions, that's why this retreat, these conversations are so important because it does give us an opportunity to look again and see because this community is changing and our public investment is influenced by private investment, particularly in neighborhoods and community. Then there's also the intentional investment by other jurisdictions in infrastructure, which also informs growth in those areas. So all of that means that what we have to provide our families in terms of educational options also has to be revisited in response to those other trends that are those other factors that are beyond our control.
Yeah, point well made. I think each of you have made some really, really good points. I do agree in looking at that more frequently. We did vote on it. I would hate to position this conversation as an either or. To Miss Wood's point, one of the schools that we have seen some declining FTE enrollment, is one of the old, I'm not from Tallahassee, but I know it's one of the oldest buildings because I've frequently visited, that building, and it's not even in my district. And every time I go for best and brightest, right? They do best and brightest there every year. And I'm talking about God. And every year, I'm like, my God, we need to do something about this. This school needs to be redone, right? It is right. And so I recognize your point, Ms. Smith, and I appreciate you advocating for your district and right there with you. But I would hate to pick one against the other or saying this needs it more than this when those buildings over there, I'm glad to see Cobb. And it's not even in my district, but I'm glad to see Cobb on that list because it needs to be loved. Yeah. Anything else before we go back to Mr. Williamson? All right, Ms. Williamson.
Any more school choice movement enrollment?
Do we have access to this today?
We can give you that session.
Yes, love that.
Excuse me, Chair, when I've seen our capital outlay priorities, we have a priority list that identifies how we establish projects which we're building. Our first priority is safety of life. Second is the number of size of instructional spaces to allow for the appropriate teacher and student ratios. Next priority is legal mandates. Four priorities, protection of investment. Fifth priorities, providing capacity for student growth. Six priorities, classrooms, other priorities. Then go to a seventh priority of facilities for making efficiency, and economic, those points that are economic justifiable, the administrative support space, and then permanent, and long lasting. So those are our 9 priorities that we have reused in this side of the building to a
Thank you, sir.
How old is that document?
It's been in the Department of Education since.
Oh, that's DOE managed. Interesting.
All right, Mr. Lacy.
All right, and then the last set of data that we're gonna look at today revolves around class size. And so class size is required for any core course. DOE puts out a list of all core courses, and identify them, and then it also tell us what the maximum class size is. That is something that we report to DOE, and part of our survey data. We get reports back from our survey data. And so we were looking, as we were trying to make some budget decisions and looking at staffing allocations and making sure that classes were full. And that, you know, we didn't have any kind of half classes out there. And so when we're looking at the data, one of the things that we noticed is coming back from DOE's data is, you know, take a school, let's say school A, and their kindergarten language arts class, which has a class size of 18. Comes back and says it's 14. And so that's an average across the school. And so that seems really low. It seems like then perhaps you could eliminate a kindergarten class and, you know, get your other classes up to 18, which is what the funding model is built around. When we got to looking at the data, what we discovered is the data that DOE reports, they do it by course code, average by course code for the school and room. But we have a number of ESC classrooms where students who are on traditional benchmarks, so they're not necessarily on access points, which would be a different course. They're on traditional gen ed benchmarks, but they're in an ESC setting. And oftentimes those classes have 3 kids, 5 kids. And so those classes are actually bringing down our class size once they're averaged in. So as we were looking at the data, and this is what we're going to look at here, what we found is that we really did not see classes anywhere in which classes were not at capacity. And so that was one of the things that we looked at here. So right now I'm going to zoom into just the story apart. All right. So, and I'm looking at, and I can do this by course, but I'm looking at language arts for story apart grade 2. Right? So this is their reading class. Class size for 2nd grade is 18. And so in order to be compliant with that, the way that DOE does this though is they do a school-wide average. So a class can have 19 kids or 20 kids. As long as your school-wide average is less than 18, then you are compliant with class size. And so when we look here at our language arts, the average class size comes back at 15. However, when we go through the data, and what we attempted to do was to suss out what really was that ESC class, right? And so we looked at the enrollment by class and we said, look, if 90% of the kids in the class are ESC, we're going to call that an ESC class, right? And so that's a separate class. And if less than 90% of the kids in the class are ESC, we're just going to say that that is a gen ed class. And it was kind of an arbitrary line that we had to draw. Right, like there is no, you know, some schools that works great, others not, but it was just kind of our best guess to draw that line. And so when we do that, and we're looking at Astoria Park, and we're looking at their 2nd grade reading class, we see that they're what we would call their gen ed regular classes. Their class size is actually 19 on average, right? And so it's the ESC class over here that's got 6 kids. That is pulling down the school-wide average. So we undertook this though to just see, and we went through all of the data. We clicked through, you know, all of the subject areas and all the different levels to see where we were with class size. And truthfully, we did not really find any classes out there floating around that were not at capacity once we pulled out those ESC classes. Interesting. Any questions about that or?
Are you saying classes within school?
Speaking of my
I'm sorry. Saying you looked at Story Park, you looked at Story Park, it looked like there's capacity there. Are you saying when you actually drill down to the classroom level, there's not?
Okay, so let me, yeah, let me, I see where you're going, maybe, and I didn't explain it well. So this has nothing to do with capacity.
Okay.
This has to do with the state requirements for class size, for 4 courses. So 4 courses have to meet, class size averages, so your Englishes, your maths. And so there's a maximum number of students that's supposed to be in a class, and they base that on averages for this. Does that make sense? Are we there? Or-
I understand that. I'm just trying to get below them.
So, okay, so what we were looking at here specifically revolved around staff. Are we overstaffing any of our schools? Is the question that we were trying to get to, right? And so when you look at, Astoria Park and their average class size is 15 for second grade reading, well, it might be possible to eliminate 1 second grade class and still meet class size if you split those kids out amongst all the remaining classes. But once we pulled out those small ESC classes, we saw that that actually is not the case. That their regular classes already have 19. Any questions about that? Or why we were looking at that, or?
Explain the second.
Yeah, it really doesn't have anything to do with class size. I mean, with capacity or number of students. He's just making the point that when it comes to the funding and how DOE reflects us abiding by class size, it encompasses all classes, general ed, special ed classes. They're all combined, and then you add all the kids up and divide by the number of classes to make sure it complies. It's not just simply these regular ed classes. One thing I would add though too with Title I schools is if the department is saying each school, classroom should have 18 students. Well, we know in a number of our Title I schools, because they receive additional dollars, they have the goal or the objective to reduce those class sizes. So instead of having 18 students, the classrooms at Bond may have 15 or 16 kids in our Title I schools because they use those additional resources to hire additional teachers to reduce class sizes.
In the most succinct way, because that was a mouthful, in the most succinct way, what research question is this stating?
Are our schools overstaffed?
Got it. Thank you.
So at least, so at least in the 4 content areas, which is the ones that have class size requirements, because non-4 content areas don't have class size requirements. And you can theoretically put 100 children in there. I mean, we would never do that, but it's possible, right? In the 4 content areas, are we overstaffed? And the answer is no. Generally speaking, no.
Perfect. Yes, sir. Continue.
Oh, that's it. I think that's all I had for you.
Okay.
That's a lot of time and effort.
It's also thank you.
How beautiful. I'm excited to see it all. Right. I mean, that was, yeah. I that image with the rainbows and like that really kind of depicts what like school choice actually looks like for the staff behind the scenes that's managing it all, right? Like it looks like
That's Jamie Holloman, right?
right, that's Jamie like trying to put it all together and then on the end of it, it comes out beautifully, but in the middle, it's how the sausage is being made. Thank you so much. Any other questions for Mr. Williamson before we and I'm going to give the board an option, either we can push through and have Ms. Bruner start her presentation, or we can take another 5-minute break. So first of all, any questions? Any lingering questions? Okay, none. All right, guys, do we want to, we're a little early. You want to do a 5-minute break?
Can I do this, can I tee Brooke up real quick and then you take a break and then she come back? If it's like,
Can you tee her? Because we're gonna have plenty of time.
I can hear her in 2 minutes.
Okay, go ahead and tee her up.
All right. So, if you look at the pages following Justin's report, people have been sending me, documents from other school districts across the state as to what they are doing to address this issue, right? So I went into the Florida inventory of schoolhouses, and started looking at different districts in the state of Florida, which I've never paid as much attention to this report as I have the first 38 years of my career as I have the last 6 months. So I put a couple of examples. One is Pinellas County. And if you look at Pinellas County, you'll see Azalea Elementary School, 55, Azalea Middle, 51%. Ardmore Elementary, 51, 56, 49, 25, 39, 60, 59, 54. Flip the page, 46. And there were 2 schools that Pinellas was talking about closing. One was at 46% and one was at 31%. Okay. So then you flip over to Sarasota County, which has been the top of the conversation about their plan. Alta Vista Elementary, 52, Booker Middle, 53, 57, 47, 44, 57, 58.
Hold on 1 second, Mr. Superman. I want to make sure everybody is on the same page.
And everybody needs to be.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Miss Jones, Miss Smith. You have it. Fine. So let's just adjourn for, we'll do 6. Let's do an even number. We're going to start at an even number. So let's do 13 minutes.
That's not the piece.
If you go to the back of Mr. Williamson's presentation after you'll see I pulled a couple of fish reports from 2 districts in the state. Y'all see those? There. All right, yes, sir. So as I was weighing what direction to go, what recommendation to bring to the board, I took into consideration the information provided by Mr. McQueen and the result of his work with the Department of Education, the information provided by Mr. Williamson. And then I started looking at other districts. People have been sending me this district's doing this and this district's closing these schools and I started taking a deeper dive into those districts, looking at where they were compared to where we are. So one example is Pinellas County. You can see a number of Pinellas County middle schools are 55, or elementary schools, 55, 51, 51, 56, 49. Bayside High School, 25, elementary school, 39, 60, 59, 54, Boca High, 46. And there were 2 schools that they were recommending to close or to consolidate, Cross Bayou Elementary at 46 and the Distant Academy 31. At 31. So then you flip over to Sarasota, which we had talked about previously in their plan. Alta Vista, 52%, Booker Middle, 53, Brentwood, 57, 47, 44, 57, 56. And even in Sarasota's plan, I didn't see anything that consolidated or closed the school. I saw that they were changing some from elementary to K-8s and relocating some district offices into schools to utilize that space. But there was nothing in their plan that I saw close the school. And then I looked at those numbers and it's compared to ours, and we're just, in my professional opinion, we're just not there yet. I think it's something that we continue to monitor, we continue to look at and examine and continue to have these discussions. But across the district, we don't have schools that are 50%, below 50%, or even worse. And I took this information coupled with, you mentioned earlier about the board meeting on November 18th and Brownsville Academy came, and there was a comment made on the dais that I would rather co-locate with a school, with a private school, voucher receiving school, than I would to close a school. And I took that comment to heart. And it was then that I went to Ms. Bruner and I said, Brooke, I want you to go out and talk to community partners and other organizations about us doing just that, about us, instead of closing schools, co-locating with other institutions and other groups in Leon County to expand our early learning programs and our pre-K programs into these schools where we may have existing spaces. So that's it. I'll let Ms. Bruner take it from there.
Oh,
Ms.
wait,
Broner?
wait, before. Sorry.
Ms. Smith, are you gonna pose any questions or are you just gonna?
I just want to add some information while it's relevant,
Okay,
if I could.
yes, ma'am.
So for the school closures, I appreciate superintendent bringing in some comparison districts, because I know we can stay within our own bubble, but it's always nice to compare ourselves to other people. But I do want to bring into, kind into the record Okaloosa closures. So the two that, Okaloosa, because we've been really, I've been at least looking at Okaloosa because one, they're ranked 17th in the state teacher salary. And two, they're within 1,000 students. So I think right now, and they're in the panhandle. So right now it's really, apples to apples, as good as we can get. Of course, we're all different. But Okaloosa, the two that they're proposing to close this year, Longwood Elementary and Mary Esther Elementary. Longwood is at 90% capacity and Mary Esther is at 78% capacity. So there must be something in the algorithm in Okaloosa that leads them to look at something beyond just capacity numbers. So I think that's a really important document. We're going to be looking at other districts. And then the second, superintendent is pointing out Sarasota and Pinellas. I also want to point out, as we look at the reasons to consolidate, for me, it's very much about teacher salary in our district. We're not paying our teachers enough. How can we get more money to give to our teachers and really, increase there? Sarasota is ranked second in the state and Pinellas is ranked about 10th. So Sarasota and Pinellas is really difficult to compare ourselves to those two districts because they're doing something financially that we're not able to do. So I would, they can choose to close or not close or whatever they want to do, but they're finding a way to pay their teachers much. So I just want to bring that into kind of a relevant while we're touching on those numbers.
Okay, as we've articulated earlier, Mr. Superintendent, 1 second. As we've articulated earlier, right? There are various data points to make different data decisions. This is not a conversation about school closure. It's not a conversation about paying teachers. We've had those conversations. We'll continue to have those conversations. Those conversations will never stop. Right now, we're talking about pre-K programs and this opportunity for Brooke Bruner, where she has hours and hours have created this presentation, and it's supposed to add additional contextual information to the earlier conversations that we've had. I would like to ensure that we stay on topic, and any conversation that is not germane to that particular subject that we hold, because what we've been doing is we found that we've had additional time at the end to have further conversation. So I don't want to divert or what word am I trying to, I don't want to veer too far off course in a back and forth to a conversation that has played out very publicly in the media. I want to stay right on track. So with that, Ms. Bruner.
Good morning, board chair, board members, superintendent. To begin with our pre-K programming, I want to provide a little bit of historical context so that you understand the monumental changes that we're bringing to pre-K in our community in an effort to better serve our families and expand our pre-K programs. So historically in our district, we have offered universal screening to every pre-K student that sits in our pre-K classes. And while that has many, many benefits, there are also some pieces of universal screening that really slows the process, reduces instructional time, and creates barriers to our families. So I have been on a listening tour for the last 6 or 7 years, not only within the district, but within the community, to really hear from our parents why they may not be accessing this really critical early learning component for their child. And many of that feedback revolves around the barriers that exist to registering, enrolling, and accessing that early learning, that free early learning program that's available to them. Just a couple other things that I want to point out before I dive into this presentation. And this is really just serves as a reminder because pre-K can be pretty complex. And so I just want to point these couple of reminders out. So we run two programs in early learning in Leon County schools. Okay, so one of those programs really provides instruction to our pre-K ESE students. Those are the students that are counted in our FTE, and we generate FTE for those students. We can begin serving pre-K ESE students that qualify for that program at age 3 and continue to serve them through age 5. Okay. Many of those students transition to us from early steps, which is part C of IDEA, and then the student transitions into our Leon County Schools programs where they continue to receive those services, okay? So we have pre-K ESE, and then we also offer another program, which is VPK. VPK is a program that is paid for by the state of Florida, and it offers 500 school year hours to families that qualify. So that would be any 4 or 5-year-old can access this program. That revenue comes to us as a reimbursement from the state that goes to our ELC. So we're reimbursed for those hours from ELC. For families that want to take advantage, we offer a wrap service, right? So 540 hours equates to essentially 3 hours a day. Okay, so that program ends at 11:30. And so our families in non-Title I schools can elect to stay for the entire school day, and they pay a private pay tuition. All right, so we generate revenue for that, and that is specifically used for staffing. In our Title I schools, about 5 years ago, we've been running this program for about 5 years. We have invested some of our Title I dollars to pay for staffing for paraprofessionals so that we can offer BPK all day to students that access BPK and want to and stay for the entire school day. So in our new reorganization for pre-K, what we're doing is we're shifting our focus from that universal screening, okay? And what that will allow is for our parents of VPK students to register. It will provide them with school choice, and those students will start school on the first day of school. And so that's going to dramatically increase the number of VPK seats that we offer. Okay, so somewhere around 300 is what we offer right now. In this new model, we'll offer nearly 800 VPK seats. It will also dramatically increase those wrap services and the revenue that's generated from those because we will be offering more VPK seats. But the most important thing about this plan is that it is more family friendly, okay? It reduces that barrier for the parent to bring their child to our office for that universal screening, wait on those results, and then be placed in school. And so what happens sometimes is even though we open that enrollment in January, oftentimes our parents aren't thinking about, oh, I need to enroll for pre-K in January for the August start of the school year. And so if families wait until July, then we get booked up with appointments
And we have many, many students that do not start on the first day of school because they're waiting to be screened, right? So in this restructure or reorganization, it eliminates that barrier. And so families will register on Focus, just like our K-12 families do. We will collect all the appropriate documentation, and then those BPK students will start on the first day of school with their peers. The limitations to this reorganization is we will have less pre-K ESE students, right, identified in the beginning. However, 3 years ago, the state provided us with a universal screening instrument. And so now we've been utilizing that for 3 years. We understand what it is assessing. We utilize it in our data analysis. So why wouldn't we use what's already available to us? Why would we require our families to come out to a separate office, receive a screening when all BPK students are screened universally? So we will utilize that data to inform students that may need to be referred for further evaluation. What that will potentially do is reduce our FTE for those ESE students in survey 2. We will pick them up in survey 3, right, where they will be identified if they need those services. We have to take into consideration that many times our students that are sitting in our pre-K classrooms, this is their first school experience. Right. And so it makes us ask the question, are we over-identifying pre-K students with disabilities? And so I think with this reorganization, it will help us to tease that out, right? Because it's going to give our pre-K students an opportunity to acclimate to school, to the classroom, what that looks like, what that feels like, right? And I think that it's going to give us a much more accurate picture of students that just needed to access quality early learning versus students who truly have a disability. And so this plan is going to help us to really tease that.
Preacher girl.
Yes. So this will require some really strong early observation practices of our teachers, and I am very confident in their abilities. We have some very veteran pre-K teachers. I value their expertise, and I am very confident in their abilities to observe and make appropriate referrals for further evaluation in pre-K. Okay, so with the pre-K expansion piece, we are looking to expand Leon County pre-K classes. And we are continuing to dive into this exercise. So in the beginning of our retreat today, you heard Assistant Superintendent McLean talk about 11 schools where we really peeled back the layers, looked at potential capacity, but now we've taken a deeper dive to look at all schools. Where is there extra space, and where would that give us some capacity to expand pre-K? The reorganization, registration, and enrollment will help with this process significantly. And we will have that information so that we can plan for staffing appropriately early on, right? And I'll take a deeper dive into that in the next slide. In addition to expanding our own Leon County Schools pre-K classrooms, we have also renewed and strengthened our partnership with Head Start. So I want to take a moment just to give a little bit of background on Head Start and why that is a good choice for our school system and a good partner for our school system. So one, Head Start is federally funded. So we are not necessarily competing for the same students, and they are targeting a very specific population of families. In addition to that, Head Start has very stringent expectations, deliverables, and they are required to report on those federally. Their curriculum and instruction matches Leon County Schools. So it's a very nice partnership. We are able to share in professional development and curriculum experiences. So for Head Start specifically, it was Ms. Smith that came to the superintendent and I guess it was the spring of last year. And so we piloted this partnership and co-location in the fall of 2025 at Pineview. And we started with 2 classrooms there. We've had a lot of success, really good relationship between Head Start and the principal. And so what that has allowed us to do is establish relationships with our families very early.
Right.
And so we talked probably in the last hour about how do we get our families to access our public schools in kindergarten, right? Because we talked about how some of our families school, they choice out or they go to a private school without ever coming to our public schools. And so through the expansion of pre-K, we provide an opportunity for families to build relationships with our school district very early on. And so that's really our opportunity to show our stuff, right? And again, I go back to, and I have to really highlight our pre-K teachers because they do a great job in the classroom and they have a very tight niche expertise when it comes to teaching. They're very good at forming relationships and bonds with their families. And so as these families are experiencing this early learning, they're also building a relationship with their school community, their principal, all of the parent involvement that goes on at the school, all of the extracurricular activities. And so it really continues to, it really kind of forges that relationship early on. So really quick, I want to go back to Head Start. So that was a long story to say we started this at Pineview. This school year, we expanded in January. So in November, I brought an MOU to the board and I said, hey, this is really working well. And so we want to continue to expand Head Start into some more of our public pre-K 5 schools. So this school year, we will have a total of 7. We started with 2. We will have a total of 7. And then going into the 26-27 school year, we will add 4 additional classrooms. And so one of those will be at Sealy Elementary, 2 will be at Astoria Park, and then our most recent visit was to Fort Brady. And so earlier, I talked about Head Start being a federally funded program. They are required to target specific populations, and one of them is rural. And so, as you know, the Fort Braden community really only offers learning experiences through Fort Braden School and through one private provider. And so this will expand that a little. I would like to see us expanding in that community. So for 26-27, we'll be in Astoria, Sealy, and Fort Braden. So for our Leon County Schools pre-K program, I talked about reducing figure years. So the way of work is that parents will register on the Focus Parent Portal. They will upload their documents there. That's new. They have not had access to do that previously. We really appreciate TIS for helping us out with that. And then they will complete a school choice form, and that is new. I've had several board members ask me in the past, why don't we offer school choice for pre-K? That was not our historical way of work. But the question is, why don't we offer school choice for pre-K? And so this year, I'm really excited to open that up for parents. They will, just like K-12, make their school selection through school choice. Now we are prioritizing that lottery, and I want to be clear that it is a lottery because we do have limited seats for pre-K. Unlike our K-12 population that we are required to serve, the only pre-K population that we have a responsibility to serve are our pre-K ESE students. All right, so these VPK seats are in addition to that. So the lottery selection will be our LCS staff first, right? So that's a perk for anyone that works in Leon County. You will get the school that you choose. And then next, parents will be required to complete school choice, even if they are selecting their home zone school, right? Because again, we are not responsible for providing VPK services. That is something that we offer to the community. And then finally, we'll be looking at sibling support, right? We don't expect our families to drive all over our community, dropping kids off. And so we will be looking at any K-5 sibling support as we want to keep those families together.
That's great.
And then, so we'll run that lottery, and parents, it will close. Parents will be notified on March 2nd. And then that will give us an idea if we have any open additional seats, right? Where we will be able to provide access to families that are on the wait list. And we'll run the second lottery at that time. So I'm going to pause there before I jump into graphs and specific numbers. Are there any questions on the reorganization?
Yes, Ms. Cox.
Sorry. Hey, Brooke, so who will do the universal assessment? So students will go ahead, they're not gonna be staff anything when they first come to pre-K. So those pre-K teachers will, like a kindergarten teacher does, observe, refer them for further testing and that kind of thing. Is that how that works?
Yeah, that's a really good question because pre-K is a little bit different than K-5. So the state requires that we administer FAST even in pre-K, and it occurs the first 30 days of school. We will bump that up a little bit for our teachers so that we can collect that data and analyze it early on, make the referrals, and then determine if further evaluation needs to occur. Now, different than K-12, pre-K does not require the MTSS process. So if we have sufficient speculation or reason to believe that there is a need for further evaluation, we may go forward with that.
Very good. And the staff will be in place to help facilitate those. All of that.
That is a wonderful question. Yes, we will. So in terms of the evaluation and staffing piece of it, we will not expect our teachers to add that to their plate. Instead, the district-wide pre-K team will push into the schools. That's a phenomenal question.
Thank you. That's what I was getting at. Thank
Ms.
you.
Wood?
We know that the 3-year-olds have to be screened for ESE, correct? So that will still stay the same, and they'll go through what process?
That's also a great question. So child find, we are still responsible for child find. And so families that have a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old, if they are concerned about developmental progress, they may still request a screening or an evaluation at the pre-K office, and we will provide that service to them. Excellent question. That part is not going away. We are still responsible for child find.
But they will not be going in as 3-year-olds unless they go through that process. And then, but you're saying 4-year-olds, really to the entire community, because everyone's eligible for BPK, can enroll in the lottery to get half day of their pre-K pay, which is good. Once I think the community really understands that, with certified teachers, I think that's going to make a huge difference. We're going to run out of seats, is my guess.
That all of that is correct. So 3-year-olds would have to go through the screening and evaluation process. 4-year-olds may register. And to your point, Ms. Wood, different from some of our private providers, all of the pre-K teachers at Leon County Schools are certified teachers, which is above the requirement that is required to teach BPK.
And I think the next thing people will ask is how much does it cost, right, to pay for that other half day if you want your child in full day? Do you have those numbers yet?
I do, yes. In fact, I think they're coming to the board this afternoon. So our tuition, tomorrow. Our tuition monthly is $425 for that wrap service. But just to be clear, in our Title I schools, we offer VPK all day at no charge.
Understand.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Wood. Great questions by you and Ms. Cox. Any other questions before we? All right.
Okay, you have this graph that's probably a lot easier to read in your notebook. Just want to give you a quick overview of what you're looking at. So first column is going to list out your schools. You will notice that some of the schools are in boldface print, though, and they have HS next to them. That stands for Head Start. So that's going to tell you the number of Head Start classrooms. The following column will tell you the pre-K enrollment in August of 2025. Now, remember, I shared with you that oftentimes the enrollment is down at the start of school because families are waiting to be screened at the pre-K office. You'll see it, and then next to that is the number of classes that are offered at each school. So for example, at Appalachia Elementary, we had a total of 19 students enrolled at the start of school in between 2 pre-K classes. But then you jump over to the following column and it shows you the enrollment in January of 2026. And then the number of classes at that school site. But I think what's really exciting is pre-K enrollment and the projections for August of 2026, and then the number of classes that will be offered at the schools. So you'll notice that Appalachia will increase from 2 pre-K classes to 5 pre-K classes. At Moore, we would increase from 2 pre-K classes to 5 pre-K classes to fill those spaces. And as I shared earlier, we're still diving into this exercise to determine other schools that may have classroom space available. Because to Ms. Wood's point, we do hope that we have a waiting list and we want to be able to fill those classrooms with as many VPK students as possible.
I have a question, from.
Yes.
Let's just stay with Appalachia.
Okay.
So that projection, is that projection based on conversations with families in the community? Is it based on students that are in the community that you know of that are going, like, what are those projections based?
They are just based on the number of student seats available. So while class size at pre-K is 18. We do not want to use quantity over quality. And so we're looking carefully at a class size of 15, and then depending on the needs of the students in the classroom. So those projections are purely based on the number of students that we have seats available. Now I will share with you that we have started the school choice process, and I'm sure you can imagine I monitor that closely. And so as of last Tuesday, we've already had over 160 families to access that, and it's only been open for just a few days.
Okay. So some of those seats are informed based on that process as well.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
Thank you.
We also look at like childcare deserts, things like that. All the resources that are available to us.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so the other thing that I would really point out on this graph is that you'll notice pre-K enrollment in January of 2026. The total number of pre-K students is 817 versus what we project for August of 2026 at over 1,100 students. And that includes our partnership with Head Start.
Brooke, how many students did you add this month? So you went from 540 at the beginning of the year to 817 now. You added how many Head Start classes in January?
In January, we added 4.
Three at Hartsfield and 1 at Piney. No, one is Sable.
Oh, so sorry, it's a total of 5. So we added an additional at Pineview, 1 at Sable Palm, and 3 at Hartsfield. Right, so this is the spreadsheet that Assistant Superintendent McLean started telling a story, and then I'm going to kind of finish the story out with what it looks like with pre-K expansion. So what you're looking at here is you have your elementary schools listed, then you have the capacity, right? We have our utilization. And so this is what Assistant Superintendent McLean covered. But then if you look at the pre-K expansion on the far right column, you can see what that will do to change the utilization and capacity. Right, and that's really our goal, is to make sure that our schools are filled with students.
So with that, we have about 15 minutes, I'm gonna open it up to some questions. I do know that there was a pending question that Ms. Smith asked, which is a very legitimate and valid question. As she asked earlier, she noted, are there 6 schools currently under enrolled? Is that the nature of your earlier question?
Under 70%.
Under 70%. And so I know that question needs to be answered, but I'm gonna open it up for others to ask questions as we kind of wind down. Oh, you have a comment? Okay. Ms. Wood?
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, next superintendent. I think this is visionary. Here we are, taking Wednesday, days, going to be serving our kids, we're going to be serving the community, we're going to be utilizing taxpayers' paid space in the method that these schools are intended for, which is to help our children and our families. And looking at some of these, how it will change, filling up the capacity is pretty phenomenal. I mean, taking Appalachia Elementary to 91%. And the list goes on, Astoria Park to 97%. I mean, wow, just congratulations. This is, I think, brilliant and just a beautiful way to use our space.
Well,
The community books.
quick clarification, are we looking at the revised utilization in the second to last column, or are we looking at the last
I'm
column?
looking at the last.
We're looking at the last column,
Once
okay.
we fill our school,
Perfect.
classrooms with pre-K, this whole conversation really changes.
Okay.
And I'm very happy about it. Thank you so much.
Hey, and thank you for all this, Brett. This is great. And how much are we, and I don't, you may not know a dollar figure, but how much revenue will we be generating with Head Start and with paid BPK? And everything?
Head Start, their lease, they're paying $1,000 a classroom. They also require office space, so those leases include a $200 rental fee for that office space. But in terms of revenue generated just for BPK, and sometimes that base allocation changes. We haven't received what I call a raise in a little while. Right now, we earn we generate that revenue based on seat time. So every time a student's absent, right, we're docked for that. But we get $5.40, $5.32 per hour per child. And so based on these projections, we would generate about 2.5 million. And then I won't be able to answer the RAP services because we cannot require families to access the RAP service. That is in our contract with the state of Florida. And so they will elect to opt for RAP when they.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you.
So when we're talking about this program and we're talking about budget pressures, this is an opportunity for us to relieve some of the budget pressure that we're currently under based on this model. Okay. Thank you. Any other
I
comments?
do want to be clear that the revenue that we generate is that the majority of it is used for staffing.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's.
it goes right
that's
back.
fine.
And it should be.
Right. Any other comments or questions?
I know, no,
Of course you're allowed. This is the open portion.
you told me, everybody with me, so I'm good, all right?
Go ahead.
Thank you. So just to be clear, the revenue that comes in from this program, it's a wash in the end, pretty much. That it comes in and it goes back out for staffing, for overhead, for whatever, whatever the need of the student, right? I think do we have confirmation from DOE that they're going to recognize our pre-K as capacity?
So at this time, DOE recognizes pre-K ESE students in our capacity numbers.
But not in the Fish report.
Pre-K ESE, yes,
That's in the Fish report,
correct.
but not VPK. Is that the difference?
That is correct.
Okay. So these numbers, on the final column, those would not be approved by DOE as far as capacity that we know of at this time. There may be some revision to that, right? Maybe, we can always hope, but we're just looking at our internal, this would not be a capacity number that would be reflected in a DOE report. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct, but it would be
So
reflected.
the next question would be, so these are not FTE that come in as a base student allocation. So these students don't bring in the revenue to the district. So while this is a great program for educational purposes, for bringing kids into the district, this doesn't do anything to help us on the financial front.
Okay, so before anybody answers that question, I didn't think I had to establish this earlier, but if someone responds and is gonna offer context, I would like for them to finish their context before, you cut them off. So let's not cut anybody off. I think the superintendent was going to add additional context. So let's make sure we establish that. Thank you.
So she is correct that in this FISH report, the students will be reflected with those students that have determined an exceptionality or disability. However, if a School of Hope was to make application to our school, we have to provide a response. And in that response would include additional students that attend school that are not reflected in that FISH report.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Jones.
So, but isn't this what we described here is much like the recommendation that came to us when we talked about collating a private provider. When we were talking about Brownsville. Here now, instead, we're talking about enrolling young people who will then ultimately, so I mean, if we believe in co-location or the option of potentially co-locating the schools, here now we find ourselves with an option that prepares a steady pathway for young people who will now be better equipped to enroll in our kindergarten classrooms, where we will collect the FTE, and subsequently, I can imagine, as I see it for the schools of great concern, our Title I schools, we are now remedying what has been a long-held problem, and that was kindergarten maintenance. Here now, we are a part of the solution and are involved with a partner who provides us with an opportunity to provide these young people with instruction the Leon County way. Right. And so subsequently, it is a win-win situation for us compared to equipping or co-located with competitors.
Well made. Go back to Ms. Smith.
Thank you. Just my point is this does not help our financial crisis at all. This does not make movement in our teacher salaries at all. This does not help pay our support staff at all. I love it. And if we were in these topics, Sarasota County, Collier County, Walton County, Charlotte County, if we were up there paying our teachers an average of $60,000, I would say absolutely. But this is a hard one for me because I love the idea. I love the notion. I love what everybody's talking about for our students, for our families, for our schools. I love that it's gonna get them there and hopefully keep them there. I hate it because it does not help our financial situation. It does not get our it does not improve our teacher salary, not one bit.
Mr. Chair.
I think Ms. Wood had she was in the queue next, and then I'll come back to you, Mr. Jones. You okay? Yes, Mr. Jones.
I was Brownsville when the hook about
There's room for all of it. So we could take all of these pre-K students and put them in a couple of different schools instead of spreading them out to every single school. We could operate more efficiently, and I believe Brownsville is bringing in straight revenue, which will be just revenue. There is no expense in that, whereas this is a wash. So we found there's a room for everything. I know when we saw the Sarasota report, there's a list of like, we're gonna co-locate here, we're gonna bring this in, we're gonna expand pre-K here, then we're gonna close these two, and we're gonna, there was room for everything in that district. And I believe there's room for a lot more creativity in this district to move that needle on our teacher salaries and to be more efficient with limited resources.
I know we keep using the buzz phrase because it's sexy, the teacher salaries, but I think that the revenue pressures, even if I think the revenue pressure that we're currently seeing is number one going to be addressed later, and two, even if we go back to some of the earlier suggestions, not earlier today, but earlier this year, that would not eliminate or relieve the kinds of pressures because we would not see the kinds of increases that I think are maybe have been projected. But again, that's neither here nor there. What we were having this conversation about was the space utilization of our district, and specifically, as the superintendent articulated, to fend off maybe outside opportunities from coming into our schools and co-locating without our say-so, which was a huge topic of conversation, not just in November, but when we were in Tampa at the school board conference. That was the talk of the town. That's what everybody was talking about. Everybody was strategizing about. Multiple conversations, multiple sessions over that. And so what I don't want to do is muddy the waters and say, yes, we're doing this, but we're not also doing, well, we're going to address that. But right now we're addressing this. So this is to address one thing. And again, it goes back to my earlier point that different data points are designed for different decision sets. So let's not convolute and muddy the waters when these data points and this plan is designed to do what, to make this decision set.
Mr. Chair, listen, I'm a quick you. I don't think the waters are muddy. In fact, they are clarified. Right? If you think about it, if the conversation has been that our schools are vulnerable because of enrollment, here now we have found a fix in that. We've now increased enrollment and at the same time so it's let me be diplomatic in my approach. I think it is important that if the conversation started, and one of the things I want us to take us back to, we as a board said that at our retreat, we would come together in the retreat. We gave guidance to the staff about what we wanted to discuss and how we wanted to remedy the crisis of enrollment at our schools by coming back with options and solutions. They have answered our response, particularly with this particular opportunity that is before us, with this collaboration between us and Head Start. Here now, we are now being able to also remedy other problems that we have identified in the district as it relates to student gains, here now by responding to the crisis of kindergarten readiness. And so here now, again, with the subject matter expertise going from our staff, not just them. I mean, I ran as a school board member, not because I saw a burden of responsibility, but an opportunity for responsibility. And here now, with the narrative that you set forth, here now we have relieved the burden as found by statutory opportunities that benefit our competition. Here now, we've addressed that. Now, as it relates to other issues, well, let's all recall that we make these decisions relative to salary. We've made those decisions unanimously. We've come to those conclusions unanimously, and we will do the same for the future as we respond to our crises. However, on this issue relative to our school enrollment and our facilities and optimizing our taxpayer assets, the staff has come back with worthwhile recommendations and opportunities that will have residual benefits that will address crises for a generation. And I could not be more delighted for it. And I hope that these relationships will be sustainable so that those improvements that we anticipate can also remain sustainable. Job well done.
Point well made, Mr. Smith. Point well made. Mr. Jones. Point well, I'm so sorry. Point well made, Mr. Jones.
Y'all
Ms.
have
Wood.
one syllable.
Mr. If you will find the last names.
Well, I was looking over there and my eye caught. I'm so sorry.
She was looking at
Yes.
you.
No, I just want to echo that. I mean, and where I am over the moon with this solution. It's our mission to the community. I agree, we have some other conversations we're gonna have in the near future, but I hope that of our, I'm gonna say our joint commitment to improving salaries, but this is the utilization of our schools under the purpose they were intended. And we say that all the time, we know brain development, 0 to 5, and here we are going to gather all these kids into our schools, get great instruction. Parents are going to get a great deal. And you can't find a better deal than this in Tallahassee. We're going to expand them for it. And it's going to help with our school choice issue. Because I know many people, they choose another school based on what their neighbor said. They've never stepped in the door of their neighborhood school. And once they step in, I think we have a lot to share and a lot to show. And they're going to go, I want my kid to stay here. The teachers love my kid. And that's how you get parents to stay in school. So starting them early, this is just fabulous.
Really quickly, Ms.
Thank you. I'd be remiss if I didn't share this. I just pulled this up. I've run the numbers several different ways for different options for our pre-K reorganization. And so I think it's really critically important that I share in this model that we are recommending. We're actually up $1.1 million. And that is run on the conservative. So I want us to remember that we only generate FTE for our pre-K ESE students if they are staffed during the FTE window. And so when I was presenting early on, I shared with you that many of our students are not yet staffed in the beginning of the school year. So we miss out on that October FTE. And so this model provides a start on the very first day of school. And while we may not be generating FTE based on a student that may have a disability, we're generating revenue. Correct. And so in this model, we are up 1.1 million. So I just want to clarify that.
So it's not revenue that's a wash, it's a surplus of 1.1 million.
That's
Thank you. Right. Got it.
And I will say that is based on some projections. Don't get me wrong, because we haven't lived it yet.
Well, right. That's why they hire futurists, right? Because we don't know. All right. I'm going to ask if there are any other questions because lunch is here and
Yes, lunch is.
yeah. All right. If there are no further questions, we're going to adjourn for lunch.
No.
Yeah. Because as long as. Like, call out, incident or whatever. I'm gonna say, and it's happened.
I know.
We
People easily take
I said, opposite, like. It's a, yeah, we're. Oh.
Shane, you already added. It's good. Well, it's a big thing.
And she was asking me, I knew that.
Oh. Oh, actually, I. So. All right, we're gonna reconvene in about 2 minutes, so that'll be 12:37. We'll reconvene at about 12:37. I don't know.
I was like, I wanted to say.
That's a good. People already have. Bring them next time. It's not. Right.
Oh, that's a.
It works great until you realize that it's at the top on well.
37. One minute. No.
I think one year we did have.
It's the 1 year we had, when we did the whole.
Yeah.
Rectangular picture, rectangular treatment, American consumers. We call it community.
I was gonna say that must have been.
Remember the small weekend, maybe sandwich, you know, words.
You know what? I didn't call me.
Favorite was that.
Oh, my goodness.
Sounds good. Hamburger. Sounds very expensive. Sounds very expensive.
So they used to have.
After the ice cream.
It was like a saucer, do you remember that? With the mashed potatoes and a slice of bologna.
That's when they had no FDA regulations. All right, it is 12:37. We are going to continue with our 12:38. We're going to continue with this retreat. This is going to be again a working lunch. And I will turn it over to our CFO, Ms. Kathy Sanders, to talk about the budget steps.
Thank you for having me. So we'll go ahead and we're gonna start with, I know Dr. Chauncey went over everything, that's kind of in the finance tab. It is all items you should be familiar with, so it should just kind of be an overview recap of the budget status for the fiscal year 25-26. And those highlights are up here in the slide. The increase to the student allocation, the BSA, was $41 from the legislature from the prior year. Due to our decreasing enrollment, that $41 was kind of negated and we ended up at a net zero. So really no new FBFP revenues.
with that, as we've spoken about, we had health insurance increased at an 8%, which equated to about $3.2 million. Our FRS contributions was about 700. We had an increase in our sheriff's contract for 275. And then our health department contract for the school nurses increased by about 400. In addition, utilities rose, they continue to rise. We're looking at probably coming to fruition on the $1.2 million that we increased it from the prior year. And then we also did some additional benefits that were negotiated of around 1.6 million. And that included the free employee extended day EDEP program, include the sick leave buyback program. We also did some increases in supplements and then added additional leave days. When we did the budget then for the 25-26, allocating all of the expenditures with the anticipated revenues, we had just at a 3% unassigned fund balance. The emergency reserve was reduced from 5 million to 3 million. And then we were left with 8 million in the unassigned for the total of 11 million, which is the minimum that we're required by DOE when we do our budgets and then when we end our fiscal year. We did move bus driver salaries and took advantage of the legislation from capital outlay. And in 24-25, we transferred 3 million. And then for the 25-26 budget, we have another 4.5 million budgeted for bus driver salaries. As the fiscal year went on, with the fear of continued decreasing enrollment and not meeting projections, we were proactive in trying to do some spending reductions on the front end. The superintendent froze travel. I'm kind of out of order here, but froze travel. We are anticipating about a $250,000 savings, and that's just actually in the general fund. This is all focused on the general fund side of things. We reduced district cost centers as vacancies became available and not refilling positions and absorbing duties. And we are currently at about a $1.2 million savings there. And then 6-month vacant positions that have been frozen and not filled, those are at 376,000 in savings.
Ms. Sanders, can I interject? So this slide is important, and the reason that it's important is because when we realized in August that we were going to have these cuts based on the legislative and the BSA, the way that it was funding, Superintendent Hannah immediately took action, and these are the 3 things. So we wanted to make sure the board was aware how much was associated with the amount we had saved by doing these items. So the reduced district cost centers, we reduced each district cost center by 10% in their budget. We did hold some district cost centers harmless, and I believe Ms. Sanders, we did not mess with maintenance. Is that right?
Maintenance, transportation, the ones that, yes, they are viewed as district cost centers, but they're directly serving students, or they're maintenance. And we did not cut maintenance, no, you're correct.
So maintenance and transportation were held harmless for this year. So this is TIS. This is going to be Assistant Superintendent Shade Seifert's shop. In addition to these reductions, we also, if I can bring you back to what happened in August when they froze all of the federal funds. So we had anticipated the federal funds coming into the district, millions of dollars. So those funds were frozen. So we had to quickly, and Ms. Bruner, you can jump in on this because you were heavily affected by this as well. We had to pivot quite a bit, and we moved individuals out of those federal funded grants, put them back into schools, and then reallocated those monies. And Ms. Bruner, if you want to talk a little bit about what that looked like on your side.
Yeah. So initially, when we found out that we may not receive funds at all, excuse me, we had to quickly pivot. A lot of those positions impacted academic services heavily with our developers, and they were moved back into classrooms, and they were not brought back out to the office. In terms of 21st century, there was a reduction in staffing, and we did not rehire those positions. We were able to secure very like briefly, funds for the Children's Services Council, but we did not have to utilize those funds, once, Title I was reinstated, Title I Part B. So, those were the impacts that were, significant to our department. So to be clear, teachers were returned to classrooms and those positions were not filled.
And Ms. Sanders was talking primarily in her presentation about what's happening in the general budget, but I also need to make sure that there is a level of understanding on what also happens and what has been cut as far as personnel through our title of our federal grants. So the district travel freeze, that was hard because we had been very accustomed to being able to go to workshops and be able to go to these professional learning events, and networking, as you know, is incredibly important across the state. That's where you build connections. That's where you find people that you can call that have similar problems that you do. So I just want to provide an example of some of that we reduced. Even though, so Dr. Knight, she is in charge of our Title I grants. It's a huge, huge job. And there's an organization across the state. It's called EdTech. And they have two different workshops that they do and professional learning events that they do each year that she funds through the Title I grants. She didn't go this year because those Title I funds were now used to be put back in classrooms to kind of patch some of what was happening. So those monies, even in the grant, other than the general fund, were also reallocated in order to serve students in classrooms in anticipation of our budget becoming even worse. The 6-month vacant positions not being filled, we did an audit, a little bit of an analysis of positions that had been open in the district for longer than 6 months, and to see if we could absorb those positions and then reallocate some of those duties. There were several positions that had been open. Again, bus drivers positions are open year round. Speech language pathologist positions are open year round. So there were some that we didn't look at and we didn't cut just because we know they're in high demand across the district. So these savings that you see here were not easy savings to come by. Affected a lot of people, affected a lot of grant managers. And if Mr. Seifler comes back, he can speak to it too, because his section was also deeply cut in the federal grants. So thank you.
And again, keep in mind that the sum that you're seeing is just reflected in the general fund. The overall cost savings is probably closer to about $500,000 when you include the federal grants as well. Okay, so not in the slides that I want to touch on, but it's in your book, is the beloved variance report. So just as a beloved.
We love the variance.
It's actually a really helpful exercise for me too, on a whole lot of different other levels of just monitoring kind of where we're at and what we're doing. But I wanted to include the prior year and then as of December 31st, 2025. And just a reminder that these are the projects that are over $250,000 with an unencumbered balance, or will end, they have over 50% of the funds remaining, being that we're halfway through the year. So they're by project number, it has a description. You'll see what the current revised budget is, the fiscal year to date activity in that project, any amounts that are encumbered on purchase orders, and then that leaves that unencumbered balance, as well as then the percentage of that balance to the budget. There's a project description, and if there is nothing bolded at the beginning, that means that those funds are unassigned and they would roll back in whatever's not spent into the unassigned fund balance at the end of the year. So I don't know how much you want me to go into it.
You have the report, right?
Yeah, it's in your book, it's just not on the slides.
Sorry.
Correct.
No. After the budget is coming, there's a couple things.
There it is.
So the base budget is kind of everything that we fund without a specific tracking mechanism. So it's the staffing plan, it's the district salaries, it's the supplies at the schools, It could be some sub budgets in there. So it's our biggest operating pot of money. And again, with most of it being at the schools for teachers and staffing. The instructional technology is one that kind of always comes up. And this used to be a categorical, but we have continued to set aside the funding for it, along with three lines down, the state adopted textbooks. That was also previously a categorical. And those you'll see ebb and flow based on adoptions of textbooks. They're expensive, so we set aside the 2.5 million every year, and then we reallocate another $2.5 million every year. And that might build up until an adoption's done. So this way we don't have to come up with $6 million in one fiscal year. It's trying to plan for the inevitable.
Miss Anderson? Sure. And so assigned versus restricted.
Restricted means that it has to be used for that purpose based on law, rule. There's some kind of guidance that says it has to be used for those purposes. It can't be used for others. Assigned is something that, I'm trying to think of a good example on here. Fee-based pre-K programs, ADEP would be another one. Those are not restricted by law, but we assign them to those programs knowing that the fees are being paid into those programs to then go back to benefit those programs. And we're doing kind of an analysis on some of the assigned right now, because when we look at our ending fund balance, that assigned rolls in with unassigned. So even though we separate them, it's kind of viewed that, well, assigned could be used for other purposes. So we're pretty sure we're going to come forward with a plan for you all, kind of what happened with the emergency reserve, that you all committed for that purpose. So moving forward in realigning some of these to say that they're committed for those purposes and they have to be used for those purposes with your permission. And then to use them for anything else, we would have to come back to you for that permission. So just a little bit of reclassifying for the budget and then when we do our financial reporting at the end of the year. There were really no surprises between last year. Oh, certainly.
So I'm going to use this example because it's a relatively small amount compared to our overall budget. But I want to know the strategy in budgeting. So I'm going to go to high school dual enrollment. And so and I don't want to misstate, but I think every single year it's at about 300,000 for example. Are we using trend data to budget for that, for example, or are we doing rollover?
The reason that balance is high right now is due to the invoicing lag. So there's a note in the note that while we've received so far is one invoice from one college. So normally we see more of the use of the funds in the second part of the year, and it usually comes pretty close to 300. Okay. And yes, those are being evaluated. They're being looked at even closer every single year for not just underspending, but overspending as well. So sometimes this isn't indicative of where we are at. It's just based on the invoicing process. One of them that I did want to bring out too is on the very last one, the sick leave buyback. We budgeted for them in specific projects to be able to track the expenditures. But when I ran the reports, why are there no expenditures? We paid it out in October. Well, they got charged to their regular line of coding where they were already being paid for. So we need to do a journal transfer to reflect those costs to that project so we know for the years moving forward what it did cost versus what we budgeted. So some of the stuff on here, again, it's a good midway year point to say, okay, are we aligned correctly, and then are things hitting correctly to where they're supposed to be hitting. So that was one that you wouldn't see from the prior year, being that it's new this year and it does look like we had no expenditure. So some cleanup on our part that you'll see them when we come back in March. And
at the conclusion of this year, will that be the first year of this sick leave buyback?
Correct.
Okay. So it's only a snapshot, so we don't have my sheet. Thank you.
Any other questions on the variance report? I will turn it over now. Oops. Skipped on you. You want to address the average teacher salaries?
So, yeah, there's been a lot of conversation about our average teacher salaries and where we rank compared to other districts across the state of Florida. And I think the number I keep seeing are seeing is 59, 59, 59. And I believe that was based on 23, 24 data. The problem we have is the last several years, we have not settled with the teachers union until after survey 3 was completed in February. So none of those raises from, in this document is 24, 25. So the raises that we gave last year through negotiations with LCTA were not reflected in this number. I think here we were at like 51,405. Where in actuality, if you were to run an average teacher salary for us today, we're at 53,864. As Mr. Cobb, went through that exercise, and then independently, the Tallahassee Democrat did a records request and ran the average teacher salary, which is what was published, I believe it was last week. So when you insert that number into the list of counties, we actually rank number 36. Now, 36, 59. We always want to do better, right? We always want to be in the top 5 or top 10. That would be the ultimate goal. But I just wanted to ensure that everyone had this information. So when you are talking to people, that we're sharing the information that is most current compared to information that was from previous years and does not come into this equation. So the other districts that are highlighted, if you see all those yellow districts that are highlighted, those are districts that have additional millage, county millage for operating expenses to include salary increases. You see Alachua, Brevard, Broward, Charlotte, Clay, Collier, Miami-Dade. Those are all counties that have an additional millage that we have had discussions before, and we'll continue to discuss that item later today and moving forward. And those counties have infused the additional millage into those salary increases as you would expect, right? So basically that sheet is showing what our average salary is now, how we compare to other districts as of that time, if you inserted that number back in. And then the districts, letting you guys know which districts have additional millage throughout the state of Florida. All right. The next page. Am I doing the next page or are you doing the next page?
Wait, before you go to the next page, can you go back to that? The average teacher salary for Alachua, for example, that's a 50. I don't have my glasses on, so I can't see it. I can't see this paper. Is that 51.9, right?
Right.
And then, but just a couple lines in Charlotte is 64.4.
Those are not ranked.
They're in alphabetical.
Oh, they're in alphabetical order.
Yeah, they're in alphabetical.
Attribute those.
Absolutely.
They're ranked here, if you'll pass that around.
Okay.
Those are with the highlights ranked high to low, because I think it's much easier to see. Sorry, my printer at home when I was doing this, because nothing was posted last night. Was black and white, but I want to point out one, superintendent said that, that our numbers haven't been maybe updated because we were still at impasse when they were reported to DOE. And I would counter by saying, well, if ours weren't updated, possibly many of the other districts weren't in the same boat as us. So I think we are comparing apples to apples. But when you sort them high to low, the highlights are the gray ones. You can see above us. And there's 24 of them that are highlighted or have an additional millage. There's 34 of them above us that have an additional millage. That don't have the additional millage and are still above us. So yeah, let's throw out, the FSU Bay, the few that are those FSU Lab School. We know what they have added on, almost district equivalencies of those university and schools, but still. I think the data ranked high to low would show us that it really, the additional millage, half of them that have it are doing better than us, and half of them that are doing better than us don't have it.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank you.
Ms. Smith. Thank you, Ms. Smith. Yeah. Miss Anderson.
All right, so the last part of the puzzle. So over the last several months, we've had meetings with stakeholders to include principals and others about potential cuts for the year 26, 27. And what you have here is a list of items. The items that are in bold are my recommendations for the 26, 27 year, which would total to around $6.7 million. And then you have the ones that are not bolded, which would be additional cuts that could be made for 26, 27, or for 27, 28, 28, 29. They're identified for the future. Now, one, I can just go do them one by one. The first one is reading categorical to type 2. So there used to be a reading categorical that was set aside by the legislature. Now that money is wrapped up into the general fund, as is our instructional materials and supplies. There are very few categoricals that are left. Safe Schools one, mental health's one, but a lot of the other projects were wrapped up into the general fund. However, we still carry that line item. And so the thought is that reading categorical and the people working in that office would be moved into the Title II grant for next year, then saving the general fund around $215,000. The second one is staffing plan adjustments in elementary, middle schools, and high schools. Now, principals will have some autonomy, as they always have, with their staffing plans. We have looked at different positions. These are positions that we have talked about that did not exist prior to COVID, that we kept post-COVID, and would love to be able to continue to fund, continue to keep, but it's just not feasible any longer. But principals, if they would like to keep those individuals, certainly have the autonomy and the ability to do that through their staffing plan and making conversions as we have allowed them to do. The next item is additional staffing plan adjustments.
Could you do your bolded items first, because those are the recommendations?
Right. So then the next one, we give $1 million a year to support arts and athletic programs, and have for a number of years. I have proposed cutting that amount in half. So moving from $1 million to $500,000. As mentioned earlier, the district cost center reduction, and that number will continue to grow as we move into the spring and have department meetings with our department heads to talk about other cuts and other ways for them to consolidate job descriptions and positions. So that number will continue to grow. As you know, community groups has also been a topic of conversation with us for a number of years. Currently, we are around $250,000 that we allocate to support community groups. It's really not supporting community groups, it's supporting our kids. Let's be clear, because a lot of that money is used for field trips, like when we go to the Riley House with our fourth graders, when we go to the Ruby Diamond Auditorium for the Tallahassee Symphony, when we go to the Challenger Center. And so these are all, we're not just handing money out. I mean, these are really district-wide initiatives that go to support our kids and our programs. So I'm recommending cutting that by 50%. Leon Virtual School, we are making the recommendation to close Leon Virtual School at the end of the 25-26 school year, which would net around $450,000 to $500,000. Of course, the teachers at the Leon Virtual School would be absorbed. We have many vacancies. Those individuals finding employment and keeping employment with us. We have plenty of teaching jobs. And then finally, the school base, or what we call their flex budget, will be reduced by $20 per student, for a total savings of the district of $560. $560,000, yes, excuse me. So years ago, when I first became superintendent, we allocated $87 per student to schools for flexible spending. That number now is at $110 per student. We would be basically reducing it back to $90 per student. So when you add all those bolded items up, it comes to between 6.7 and 6.8 million dollars.
So the reason I want him to go through his bulleted points first is because this is really the staff recommendation for us to consider and for us to discuss. After that discussion, then we can go through the non-bulleted items and have a discussion of that. And then, as I stated at the agenda review, if we've gone through, if we've exhausted this list and we've talked about the pros and the cons and the implications and the impacts, after we've gone through those things, if we're still saying, you know what, you're still not worth the squeeze, right? There's still some meat on that bone, then we can talk about other things. But I definitely wanted to go through superintendent's recommendation and his staff's recommendations first, as they have put time to this. So let's first talk about the bolded items. Anybody have any questions, any comments, any statements for the superintendent and his staff? Yes, Mr. Jones.
Anybody else want to go first? What I think is important as we talk about some of these, particularly I think about community groups with advance notice, right? As we come to these conclusions, right? We will prepare, the community will be prepared to respond appropriately. They will look for other options, right? The fact that we still have skin in the game on behalf of our children is critically important. I know that these recommendations across the expanse are not made easily. So, and I just appreciate the subject matter expertise that is brought forth. I'm glad to also hear that you described, Mr. Superintendent, that you've been also in consultation with your principals directly about what these impacts will make. One of the things I appreciated that Mrs. Wood said at our last school board meeting, and that was the goodwill found in our community. I think that for a community engagement in our schools by community-based organizations, churches, fraternities, sororities, mentoring, volunteering, and all the rest of it, and as well as intentional investments in our foundation, can also are critically important at this time. And I'm hoping that as a part of what we do is, and I always talk about this, Ms. Wood talked about this when I first came on, and she was our chair, and that is making certain we're telling our stories. Here now, there's a translation to be made, and I think that is what has been the whole nexus for much of the conversation that we
Into your microphone.
I'm sorry. I think that's the whole reason for the conversation. We realize that there's a challenge, but there's also where there are challenges, there are also opportunities. And I think we need to make certain that we are articulating that to our community, that there is an opportunity for them to engage for the sake of our children. I can tell you that for us and for our Title I schools, we as a board, we're intentional about our conversation and providing pathways and opportunities for our community to engage. That engagement, we know, moves the needle in terms of community support in those Title I schools. Here now, we find ourselves, the entire district, as a challenge. And again, our community has opportunity to engage. And I hope that as we translate these cuts, that we make certain that people understand that these cuts, although dollars and cents and coins, also translates to children and whose names they may not know, whose faces they may never see, but they have an opportunity to be engaged to fix that, what we find ourselves and the challenge that we find ourselves in.
Also, yes, Ms. May.
I wonder if we can get a little more information on the staffing plan adjustments of the 3.6 million. Obviously, that's the biggest number on your end is in black. So I think that's kind of like, we got to hit that one hard. And then how does that vary from the next four that are also staffing?
Good question, Ms. Smith.
So the bullet item is the $3.6 million are some of those positions, again, that we added during COVID and were paid for with ESSER dollars. Then that we kept after the ESSER money expired in September of 24. We kept many of those positions to include school social workers, academic interventionists. In addition, if you remember prior to Parkland, one of the first things that I did on becoming superintendent was to add security monitors at our elementary schools. Well, now post Parkland, and that was before we had armed security officers at our elementary schools. Now post Parkland, we have armed officers in all of those schools. So it includes the security monitors, the social workers, and the academic interventionists. But again, principals that have been funded at the district. But again, the principals have the discretion if they feel as though that this position is vitally important, this second interventionist position is vitally important, then they do have the autonomy and the ability to do a conversion to keep that position. Or if a high school feels the same way about a school social worker, that they also have that ability. We have several high schools, in addition to in their staffing plans, have additional deans and other people. And so it's just, we can no longer, in my opinion, continue to support these positions in the staffing plan at the district level.
So to clarify, this does not include any assistant principal positions or administrative staff.
So we will be examining assistant principals and principals at a couple of our, especially our Title I schools. We have a second assistant principal. So we will be looking at some of those. Another thing we did several years ago, we added a second guidance counselor to all of our smaller elementary schools that previously did not have one. They year after year, they would come to me and say how they desperately needed that additional counselor. Those people are still going to be funded through the staffing plan. But if we have a situation where, again, I'll use Sable Palm as an example, that has a second assistant principal, that person potentially would look to be reassigned if we have, as we have people that are exiting. The additional staffing plan adjustments would be prior to COVID, our schools, elementary schools, received half of a reading coach. That would just be returning to a half. So now, instead of receiving a half, they'll receive a whole. But that additional 876,000 would be if we went back to the way it was before COVID, and they each received a half. The K-3 staffing, instead of staffing at 18, which we currently do, we staff at 19, is about a $2 million savings in the staffing plan. Moving from 22 kids to 23 students in middle school is about a $1.7 million reduction in the staffing plan. And then 9 through 12 from 25 to 26 is about $900,000.
Ms. Smith?
I mean, I have a lot of follow-ups. I do want to listen to.
Yeah, okay. Then I'll go to
He answered my question. You can go back to.
Okay.
My question was answered, so thank you, Ms. Smith.
Okay, it appears over the last 5 years, we've gone from 73 assistant principals to 80 assistant principals. That's according to the DOE website data. We've gone from 176 total administrative staff in our district, no matter where they're allocated on the grid, a total of 176 to 217. If we compare ourselves to our counterpart, and you're tired of hearing about it, but it's just easy. If we go to Appaloosa, they are at 121. So again, we're at 217 total administrative staff. They're at 121, so almost 100 administrative staff difference. I'm so disheartened that we are looking at social workers, guidance counselors, academic interventionists, and we're not looking at this. We're not looking at administrative staff and assistant principals. To me, I would request that we go back to the drawing board and look at administrative staff. We look at how we can literally hold our classroom harmless. It has hit me hard having a daughter in a Title I school, even adding, I see the problems she deals with on a day-to-day basis. and adding even one more student to her class is gonna make her day even more challenging than it is now. And I know you guys are tired of hearing about it, but if we were to close schools or consolidate or right size our district, whatever word you want to use, we would be able to keep the social workers, we'd be able to keep the academic interventionists, we'd be able to keep our class size small. But instead of having that as an option for us to consider today, which was what I requested specifically, and I've been denied to even have that possibility of discussion, we would be able to keep all of these in place. That would be a conversation that we could have had as a board. We could have seen the difference between the two. So I'm just very disheartened, but I would ask that we look at administrative cuts before we would look at classroom cuts.
We should be, thank you, Ms. Smith. I appreciate your words. We should be really, really clear. The phrase "I have been denied" is disingenuous and it's not really accurate. As a board, we, during, I don't know if it was a workshop or if it was an actual school board meeting, but it's on the record, where I went down the line, and I specifically asked, do we want to talk about school closure? And we were specifically talking about brick and mortar because on the record, in one of the bolded cuts recommendations is actually virtual school. It's a school, right? It's just not a brick and mortar. But nevertheless, I went down the line and I specifically asked every single school board member if they wanted to include that conversation in the retreat. So it wasn't you were denied by a single person. I'm not saying you, that's what you said. But we as a board decided that we were not going to exercise that option at this particular retreat. We're going to wait until the superintendent brought back recommendations. We were going to hash out those recommendations. And if those recommendations were unsatisfying to the board, then we would go back and have a subsequent conversation about additional recommendations made by specific school board members. So I'm not sure why the narrative has been turned where someone, a board member, is being denied. We make all of our decisions as a board. If we want to have a conversation about a specific topic and it's going to occupy or commandeer copious amounts of staff time, we want to be sure that we all want to are aligned. We all have a common goal in that particular item. So we go back to the bolded items. We are satisfied with the bolded items. If we move forward, if we are not, then as Ms. Smith has done, she can make additional recommendations. And then we can talk about those additional recommendations as a unit.
Let me just respond as to why I feel denied.
Okay.
Superintendent's words from October 14th, you have my commitment before now in the holidays, that we will have a list, including schools, assuming no closures, on that list, along with a number of other things that we feel as though we could cut, and then we'll have that conversation with you. Moving forward, I'll have a comprehensive list of things, both on the cutting side and the increase of revenue. But I do think looking at our schools and the ages of our schools, some of our schools may be under capacity more than others, but they're in much better shape. We want to take all this into consideration. All of that was deleted from this conversation today. There was no option for school consolidation today, and that's why I feel tonight.
Well, no. So first of all, he did actually have the conversation about closing schools. He mentioned it. He talked about the ripple effect, the domino effect. If we did this, but it did not come as a list of options. That's one. Two, we do have a school on the chopping block, right? We have some virtual school. You may discount it. You may not. You may not see it as a viable option, but it's there. Three, this is our workshop. This is not the superintendent's workshop. Let me be very clear about that. And we as a board get to decide what our workshop looks like. And that's what we decided. So regardless, I'm not discounting him. He's an elected, he's his own body. He's the CEO of the district. He is operational. We are aspirational. And so in our position as aspirational decision makers, we get to decide the future of our district. He executes what we recommend. And so we as a board decided in our aspirational authority that this is what we're going to talk about.
My request was that school consolidation be included in the list of discussions today. And that is the only thing that was not on the agenda in my 12 years on this board. Every time we've all requested, any board member has requested for something to be a part of the retreat, we always had our top three, and 2 and 3 sometimes didn't make it, but number 1 always made it. And this year, my number 1 did not make it.
Well, Chair,
Yes, Mr. Jones.
oh, if I may, because I remember this conversation specifically, and you know that I love to wax eloquent. But this retreat, unlike other retreats, where we do come with our options, we were consolidated that we would talk about this issue and everyone would not bring their individual aspirations. Because I'm always going to talk about caring the vulnerable student populations, Title I CTE, all of that. You notice that even as CTE is added as an aside because we were singular in our perspective. You remember we were having conversations about as a board regarding what we knew were the challenges born of legislation that came out of last year's legislature and what we saw as the ominousness of what was before us. And so, because we lacked the subject matter expertise in the data, we as a board, and you did go down the list, and we all agreed that we would keep this topic for the length of the board, and that you, the superintendent, would come back to us with recommendations. Now, consolidation, school closures, and we've all co-opted this word, right? What we've been able to see today is that has been a veer because we've now responded to the challenge of low enrollment in our schools, particularly in our elementary schools, because of the recommendations that have been made. Then with the fish analysis, we've also been able to identify where where the numbers have changed in terms of our enrollment data. And so here now that the ominousness of it all is now somewhat averted because, again, based upon relationships and analysis, we now find ourselves far different than we were prior to the retreat. Prior to the retreat, and now armed with this information, we now move forward. Now, if we want to talk about consolidation in the context of these numbers, I don't know where that then appears. But we are now open to have whatever conversation, true enough, but we do so now, not, again, like I said before, outside of rhetoric and anecdotal and myth. We now deal with real numbers, and armed with these real numbers, now if we have a conversation about our path forward, we do so armed with the numbers that come from our district and from our staff and from our subject matter expertise. So when we then raise a question about the number of administrators, yes, we do that based upon the information that's been provided to us, and then we make decisions from there. So I feel better equipped now to have that conversation than I would have prior to this retreat. And that's why I've been amazingly silent and have not responded, because I deferred to the expertise of the superintendent and his team to bring us the information where I could then talk with some intelligence. Thank you. No, I remember I made certain I had my surgery while we were away from the dice. I was gonna miss that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're gonna go to Ms. Wood, Ms. Compton, and I'm gonna go back to the superintendent.
Actually, I wanted to hear from the superintendent. I know we all know the staffing plan adjustment hurts. And the $3,650 is gonna say, what percentage of the staffing plan is that? And
Our staffing plan was around 200 million, so probably 1.5%, between 1.5 and 2% maybe.
okay, that's because I know, we've had other talks about the money is, we know, in staff in our district, that's for, except for buses and food and things like that. Most of our money's out of the staff, so I was expecting you to say, honestly, I'm hoping not that you were gonna say like a 10%, cut in staffing plan, but you're saying this is closer to one, some, I mean, it all hurts, but that 1% hurts, but it's not as drastic as I feel.
Well, it's basically returning to what we looked like prior to the pandemic. For the most part, it's not worse than that, but also, like I said, traditionally, we had half a reading coach in our elementary schools. Now we're leaving the whole coach. We're removing one. But if a Title I school or other school decides, that's really important, I want to keep the second. They've always had the ability to add that person, like when we only gave them a half. Title I schools would use Title I money to get the other half of the person's position.
For a social worker.
Correct. So they'll still have those flexibility.
Ms. Collins. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Wood, did you have follow-ups?
I think so. I think just the conversion idea is really about the principles. Because you may have a dynamite social worker at your school and it needs everything to keep that person versus having an extra this or that. So I'm really glad that you're allowing the principals to do versus to what's good for their school and largely it revolves around people. And you have to job.
Thank you, Ms. Wood. Ms. Cox.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all for this discussion too. And I know that this is not easy, but like you, Ms. Wood, I'm glad to see it's not as big as I really thought it would be. I also I appreciate the fact that you brought in all the principals because I've heard that from many and I've heard all of the staff from our schools and how much that meant for you to bring them out to hear and to listen to their advice, to their concerns, and so I know that you allowed them to have input. My question goes back to Ms. Smith from Okaloosa County. So what number was that a number of administrators? And do you know if those were district and school administrators? What was?
Yeah, so they have a spreadsheet about them and breaking them. It's kind of like facilities broken down like the new job spreadsheet, but the end number of the total. They would be administrative, it could be instructional, it could be non-instructional, but it's assistant principals, deans are all in that list. Okaloosa is at 121, and we're at 217. So we're 100 different, now they operate 44 facilities and we operate 56. So again, we're just really, just like, can we get rid of some of these facilities? Can we get rid of some of this administrative overhead? I think they have and they focus on teacher salary, and that's what I'm urging our district. Salary, so that's 100 administrative difference. You can see it in the breakdown on the spreadsheet.
So thank you for that. And then my question, I know that some districts, I think Oklahoma is one where they contract out all their construction, all their maintenance, they contract out all their food service. So IT, those are positions that we have in-house, whereas they don't count that as part of their administration. But that doesn't relate to the number of facilities that they have. And real quick question that's not on this list, I'm just curious. Have we ever looked at our district office buildings and have y'all looked at that and relocating some of those, closing down some of these facilities?
We have, and one difference between us and Okaloosa is they spent a lot of money consolidating and took an old Lowe's or an old facility like this, basically brought everybody in where we have this spot. We have transportation. We have over here at Admin East. We have Bloxham. We have Weston. Bellevue's even on our list down. The slab at Sale is still on our list when you add all those spots up. We have not spent capital dollars, unlike Okaloosa, to build an administrative or rent out administrative space to consolidate and bring everybody in. We have several facilities over on Tharp Street. I don't know if you've ever been in purchasing or our central kitchen. I mean, it's not good. I mean, they're tired. I mean, but they're still on our inventory list.
So was there any conversation with facilities about consolidating some of these district buildings or reworking that to release some of the overhead of buildings?
So with Bloxham, we're pretty much full. We have fiddlers do a grant with a flow through grant at Bloxham. This building does have some space, but it doesn't have enough space to bring all of my cost center over here. So, yeah, but we'll continue to have those discussions and continue to look at options. You know, when I was preparing for today, I kind of read the room of board members and where the majority, I felt like the majority of board members stood on the issue of consolidating and closing schools. And I felt as though the majority of board members were not in favor of consolidation and closing schools. And I took, and Ms. Smith has mentioned my words at previous board meetings, I believe in October. But I'll hold her to her word in November, that she would much rather co-locate with Brownsville Academy as opposed to close the school. Well, that's what we are doing. It's just not with Brownsville Academy. And so even at that time, it was to Rita Brown, I would much rather co-locate at your school rather than in our schools rather than close the school. So, you know, given that I read you all and listened to those words, that's when I went to Brooke and said, okay, let's move forward with a co-location model that we can control, not someone else.
Okay, and I think it's important to know that because we live in the capital city with Florida State, FAMU, TCC, that our tax base is so different than some of these other counties. And I'm not a math money person. My husband will tell you that. I'm a people person, but so I think that's something we also have to when we're comparing our district to other districts. We're a very unique district in that regard. Last question, and then I'll be done. The arts and athletics. So of course, my heart is in that part. So what is that going to look like, cutting that budget in half?
So we'll continue to fund middle school athletics 100%. It'll just be us reducing, instead of giving $50,000 to every high school for the arts and $50,000 for athletics, we'll just give them $25,000 for the arts and 25. We're just splitting the amount, reducing the amount about 50% that we're sending to them. But it was prior to this, they didn't receive anything. I mean, they received a little bit of athletic money, but not a lot. I have Kathy doing some research that we make sure that we're still funding them at the levels that they were funded at previous. So that's moving to $1 million. But the arts, they've never received any money at all. And so we are still going to send money, but it's just not as much.
Fantastic question, Mrs. Cox. And I want to actually ask a follow-up because I want to know what that means for, you know, a kid at Gotti who wants to play football. Right now, the costs are lower because they have that money. So will the cost to play football increase?
Yeah, and that was the whole goal, was to reduce costs for students and parents of those students, for these kids to be able to participate in programs, whether it was the marching band or whether it was on the volleyball team or the cheerleading squad. That was the goal. But I just think we're in a time now where unfortunately there's going to be some pain points, and we're going to have, you all or us together are going to have to make some tough decisions. And in a perfect world, I agree. I would not bring it as a recommendation. But let me also say, and I'm not sure where Ms. Smith got this data. It's the first I've heard of it. We will continue to look at Pensacola Street and any administrative overhead in our schools to cut there as much as we possibly can. I feel as though we've already reduced those numbers even through the course of this year. But yeah, I'm committed, and we're committed to only keeping the things that are a necessity on Pensacola Street to support our schools.
Yes, Mrs. Cox.
Last comment, because I just feel like I need to say this too, because I, as a teacher and coming in and being a teacher during COVID, that year or two following COVID, seeing the needs that we saw in our schools, I want to applaud this district for stepping in and putting these extra supports in place. Teachers were drowning, and I know some teachers are still drowning, but it was such a difficult task dealing with some of our students and just the issues that many of them had coming back to school off of COVID. So we knew this day was coming. We kept saying that ESSER dollars were going to be leaving, and that's kind of where we are right now. And so we've done a great job, I feel like, supporting schools, administrators, teachers, and now we just have to figure out a way to come together and still support those two, because there's still some needs that are there. So I appreciate you allowing the schools to have the flexibility, because every school is a little bit different and their needs are a little bit different. But at the same time, making these tough decisions, it's not easy. So
Wonderful questions. Mr. Jones, that's your go.
Yes. One of the things that I'm aware of that the superintendent wrestled with, because there was a time when you were looking at all the schools and you were even talking about potentially merging some sites. And I can tell you, the reason it gave me pause that we were even considering that my grandfather used to always say when I was growing that he didn't fatten frogs for snakes. I grew up in Pinellas County, Texas. We were known for the beach. We were known for orange groves, right? So there was always some animal or agrarian or agricultural reference made to make his point. But he used to always say, I don't fatten frogs for snakes. That means that he did not feed his enemies. One of the things that we know about the current legislature and its current statute is that when we close schools, our competition are the inevitable benefactors. Because they then have opportunity to take these taxpayer assets for which we are stewards and potentially turn them over to them in neighborhoods that formerly had a public school and will now have a private school. And for a community like mine, that creates another challenge because then you're now armed with this now former taxpayer asset that now is in the hands of private industry. Here now that neighborhood school now may no longer serve the neighborhood. Right? So to me, the very thought, and there are those of you who predate me in this district, maybe not on the school board, but in this district, y'all have witnessed what school closures have meant to communities and neighborhoods. And for me in my district, and for all of the schools that serve our children, neighborhood schools are critically important. And what we did in District 3, because of the collective help of everybody in this room, we then armed our parents with they no longer had to seek colder ice in other neighborhoods. There was quality ice right there in their own community. Their neighborhood school was just as good as any school found anywhere else in this community, just as good. Pineview is just as good as any charter school in this community. Bond provides instruction of equal quality to any school in this district, and that is critically important. So we don't fatten frogs for snakes. We don't take our taxpayer assets and give it to our competitors for them to then come in and change our community and our neighborhood. The whole reason we started this privatized education model was never about the selflessness. I'm not talking about private schools. I'm talking about charter schools. It was always about how they could make money. And here, ordinarily, a private school relies upon private investment. Public schools rely upon public investment. But here now, with this charter school movement, private industry relies upon government. And so here now, I am grateful for the great work that you all have done to change the frame of this discussion relative to how we respond to these challenges by no longer fattening frogs for snakes, but instead making certain that we remain good stewards of the taxpayer assets for which we were elected to protect.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Any other comments, questions, conversations? Absolutely, Ms. Wood.
Well, the bottom line in your bold is, $6,762 in savings. That's, we want to push that up, Scott's basically. Is that enough? You have these other things?
Well, that's why I have those other things on the list, as we get to, once the legislature finishes and we look at our numbers and crunch our numbers, if we have to dip into that other 6.6, we'd have to move to another level and start identifying other items. I mean, you can see I even put a furlough on there for exempt employees. So I don't think we're there yet. But to your point, yes, if we need to make additional cuts, that's why I identified a total of about $13.5 million. And again, I can't tell you, when it comes, we have to make a decision. It was either to use those spaces to consolidate and move those kids and rezone those kids to other schools to fill those spaces, or it was to partner with Head Start and expand early learning. And I don't think we were at that point yet. We did not have schools that were 42, 49, 39. Now, if things change in the years to come, then maybe the discussion changes. And you know what? We didn't want to, but now, these enrollment numbers at this point, we have to go in a different direction. I just didn't feel for the 26, 27 years that was the right time. And if you look at potentially the utilization numbers after Brooks expansion, it's incredible. They're in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
So,
Nothing compared to other counties that have 32%. That's not good.
So I have Mr. Jones and then I have Ms. Cox, but the superintendent hit this point, but I wanted to make this really, really clear. The 6.7 million that's proposed is not inevitable because as he articulated, we have to wait until after legislative session. It can be more, it can be less. This is what we're saying that is palpable. We can swallow this and the district staff moves forward here. And then if they come back to us in March after the session, then we may have to look at some of the other items proposed. But this is the list of items. If we are all in agreement that this or the majority, right, because we work on majority is in agreement that this is an acceptable potential budget reduction list. And the superintendent, based on, first of all, what's bolded as the priority, and then if it comes back that it's more than a $6.7 million deficit, then he would come back to us and say, okay, so what about this, this, and this, so that we are in the know, so that we can arm our constituency with the decisions that we make in real time. So I just want to make sure that that was really clear. Right now, there's no vote, this is just, here's where we are thinking about where we're going to go. So I want to make that clear. So I'm going to go Mr. Jones and then Ms. Cox.
I'm done.
Oh, you pulled your mic down. I thought you wanted to say something else. Okay, Ms. Cox.
So thank you for this. So my question, and it goes back, where does that leave us for any allowance for teacher salary?
perfect. Great question.
Thank you.
So I think these dollars would then offset any increase in expenses and potentially could be used for pay increases. So we have to see, okay, what are our revenues that we're going to generate from the legislature for next year, along with these dollars, and then what are we projecting as our expenses for next year, and then what can we give for salary increases? So absolutely, could some of that money be used for salary increases? Hopefully, yes. Right. So, but I do think, to answer your question, the goal would be hopefully we won't experience the same amount of expense that we did. We know healthcare is going to go up, but hopefully utilities won't increase as much. Hopefully our contracts with the sheriff's department, Leon County Health Department, and other things won't increase as much. And so it can be used for both to offset expenses and to get salary increases.
Thank you.
Good question. Any other questions, comments, concerns?
Well, Mr. Chair, beyond potential budget reductions, there are other conversations for us to have. We started this, I remember, Stephen Vancouver. Oh, yes. Came and talked to us, and I don't know where that falls. Do we do that under an agenda review, under new concerns and returning concerns? But we had that conversation and we have yet to revisit that. Right. So again, we talked about options relative to school Because what, now let me say this. As long as I've been on this board, and I've been on the board now, 7 years, everybody had a hill to stand on. Right, mine's always been titled school CCD. Right, Rosanna's had hers. Edie Rasmussen famously had security and safety. Right, you've always talked about teacher salary. That has always been your hill, right? And I know that the conversation, I know that the conversation we're having now is born of what has been your continuing interest, right? Both privately, publicly, from the dais and an executive session to increase teacher salaries. What I think we need to be prepared to talk about are sustainable revenues. I don't question the nobility of your intention, but I don't believe that school closures or consolidation provide us with the sustainable impact that we all want. People are not flies on the wall in here, but it's our continued and consistent deliberation about wanting to make certain that our teachers and our staff persons are paid. We've all said that we did not want to pay poverty wages, right? So let's have a conversation that we lay all options on the table for sustainable teacher salaries increases, right? And continue to make these hard choices and hard decisions whereby we are able to pay our staff. But for me, I never saw school closures as a remedy for that, because one, it displaces people who are then ultimately unemployed, potentially when the school closes, and then I know the impacts on the demographics and the economy of the scale of the neighborhoods for which those anchor institutions formerly exist. So I think there's a conversation to be had, but it's not done at the expense of consolidation. School closure, many other fancy word be used to describe it, but there's a conversation whose time is continues to come and is always looking. Thank you.
Mr. Superintendent. So if you look on the actionable items at the end of your agenda, and I know we're coming up on a close to move into the next phase of today. But you can see the items that are listed there to include the renewal of the half penny sales tax and potential millage increase. And so, yes, I believe that I've had conversations with some folks here locally with Mr. Vancore and some others recently about establishing a funding mechanism, because we can't do that, but to establish some community support and funding piece for these initiatives. But I do think sooner rather than later that we need to have that conversation, especially about the millage issue. We know the half penny sales tax is definitely going to be on the ballot. One thing I do want to bring to your attention is I've had several conversations recently with members of the legislature and with the Florida School Superintendents Association about potentially allowing for a whole 1% sales tax in lieu of a millage increase. So right now, local municipalities have the ability to tax up to 10 mils. We at Leon County Schools are at 5.4. When you add the required local effort, 3.2, the 1.5 capital outlay, and the 0.748 discretionary millage, we're at about 5.4. Meaning by law, the school district could ask for an additional 4.6 millage increase to support operations. Not that we would ever do that, okay? But by law, we do have that ability to go to the voters and ask, right? So what I have asked people to consider in this whole conversation of property tax reform, property tax reduction, is to no longer allow districts to ask voters or residents for an increase in millage. But instead allow voters in a community or in a county to ask for a whole penny instead of a half, where half of that 50% would go to support capital projects and 50% would go to operating expenses, more specifically salary increases for teachers and employees. As you know, for us, the mill generates around $26 million in Leon County based on property values. Half penny sales tax is about $31 million a year. In addition, the millage increase has to be reapproved every 4 years. The half the penny has to be renewed up to every 15 years, which we're on that cycle from 2012 to 2027. The conversations that I've had with individuals have been very positive in this whole era of wanting to reduce school property taxes, people's ability to increase property taxes, where 100% of a millage would come upon us and the other residents of Leon County. As you know, another half penny sales tax would not just be us pitching in to support our teacher salary increase. There would be people coming from all across the Canadians would pay for it, right? So it's basically changing the law to where districts can no longer go and ask for millage increases on a referendum, but could ask for a second half penny to support operating expenses. As you also seen, may or may not have seen, Senator Simon and his legislation is deregulating or is attempting to deregulate capital outlay dollars to where capital outlay dollars are no longer restricted. The capital outlay dollars would be in play for any other type of operating expenses. I think that's a double-edged sword, quite honestly, because then you're weighing the need to replace school buses and do renovation projects with salary increases. But I said all that to say that I have had conversations with individuals about potentially not allowing districts, and the ones that already have a minimum increase, allowing those to sunset, and then for them to go back and ask for a second half penny. I think it makes a lot of sense to me, but that would have to happen now. And if it doesn't have to happen, then if it doesn't happen now or next November, then we have to have a discussion about putting that millage increase on the ballot, which to me, there's going to be potentially some type of ballot action item that discusses the reduction or elimination of property taxes. And then beside that, having the school district asking for an increase in property taxes could potentially be confusing to voters. But we'll wait and see how it plays out. Mr. Vancourt believes that because of his polling, that the residents of Leon County strongly support doing something at the local level to support and to help our teachers.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. With 9 minutes, I'm going to go ahead and allow Ms. Cox, if anybody else has any closing statements, any questions, comments, concerns, and then I'll close this out.
On that line, thank you, Mr. Superintendent. I like the idea of the sales tax. I do like that. So question, have you gotten together a committee or are you planning to get together a committee looking at the half penny sales tax renewal? I didn't realize, I was talking to Alan, that that's not a guarantee that would pass. There have been times through the years that it has not passed. So I want to make sure that we're getting community input and all that. So you are going to get a group together.
Yeah, like I said, I had a meeting with Mr. Vancourt and a couple of community members that want to, be supportive. But now, yes, we're going to start moving very quickly to organize that effort. We've been lucky. It was initiated in 2002, reaffirmed in 2012, and then reaffirmed in 2012. And now we'll go back for a third time. So, yes, to your point, we will. And if you have individuals that would like to help or serve, please let me know.
Great, thank you.
Ms. Wood. Thank you, Ms. Cox.
You highlighted the districts who have, I believe these are the ones who have raised the millage increase and they have absent sales tax for capital, do you know?
I don't. Most of them do. Most of them, I think more like us have at least a half penny, and then they also have additional millage. So most of the ones that have additional millage also have a half penny.
My point is just, I don't think we should overlook that. We've got all these districts, I didn't make a count, but it's at least in the 20s or so that have had successful referendums and gotten half cent and a millage. And that is what Mr. Vancourt's results said. So I just don't you know, to think that the legislature might change to one penny sales tax, that's, you know, a nice thought, but things happen slowly. I just don't want to take this millage increase off the table because we know that to make a substantial salary increase, we're gonna have to do more than say $1 million here or there, which is all that's gonna be left after these cuts. So
Yeah, I'm not recommending that. I agree with you 100%.
I don't want to put a big bucket of cold water on that yet, because it's really important that we do raise significant money. And even though you asked the question, will there be money, your salaries left, there's not going to be enough money to really make the kind of difference. I think we all, so we have to figure out some revenue source, whether it's, you know, sales tax is known to be regressive. I have to say those words because that's how they are looked at. You know, I really want to keep looking at the military first.
So, any other questions, comments, concerns? I'm gonna, ask, somebody made the point earlier, but I'm just gonna ask specifically at our next, agenda review meeting that, we have a timeline, on, the half-penny sales tax. Where we are. I'm gonna ask that we have, similar to the timeline that was created for the curriculum audit, where we have dates by which the committee meets, who's on this committee, topics that is going to be discussed, and regular updates to the board so that we know where we are in that conversation. If we want to pursue, and again, that's going to be a conversation similar to the way I've operated as chair thus far, is if there's not an appetite by the majority, then if it's not, then we're no longer going to have that kind of discussion. Because at that point, I would recommend, and I think someone said, I want to give it to Mr. Jones, but someone, you know, articulated to me at one point that there's a couple ways that you get things on the ballot. One is through the school board members, and or you can, you know, gender some sort of community group, and they can, you know, raise the issue. I'm not quite sure who said it and in what context, but I, you know, I admittedly don't know enough about the millage rate and how it all works in order to say yay or nay, but I look forward to being educated later on. But with regards to half penny, I would like for the next agenda review for us to have a timeline. Is that, yeah, that's the next one, yes, ma'am. Absolutely. So that we can know what's happening. And then our next that we did not get a chance to talk about CTE, but at a future agenda review, I look forward to a workshop.
That's what I said. CT is on workshop today. Oh, at 3. We have workshops at 3.
Back up. Okay, right on. All right. So all hearts and minds. Yes.
A quick request,
Sorry.
I would love if we can live record this at our next retreat next year. I've had 1 or 2 people text me, are y'all live? And I'm like, I don't think so. So I would just like to make that request that it is a live recording. Like we do things. Yeah. Thank you.
Live over there, right there, right there. Yeah.
Not for the general public, right?
All right. Any other comments? We got about 2 more minutes. You told me not to bang my gavel, sir.
No, back yourself.
Can I bang it? All right.
That's